Since the time that I was a child, there has been things that have happened in or to my family over the years that fit snugly into the topic of the paranormal. I no longer live in my childhood home, having moved 5 years ago to a farmhouse, more northern up in the state. But an occurrence that I do recall was a girl that could sometimes be spotted just across the street near our mailbox. So, our house was just off of a corner, and across the street lay a neighbor's dark red house with 2 pine trees, close to the road, and in front of that, on the edge of the road, was our mailbox. Now, as you turn onto our road coming in from the direction of town at night, the headlights of the car would, for a moment, illuminate the mailbox and the pine trees as you pass. And it was only in the headlights that you could ever see her, though, a young woman. Maybe looked to be in her late teens or early 20s, with dark straight brown hair, clothes being reminiscent of what girls wore in the 70s as far as the skirt and blouse went. She would be leaning toward the road, looking towards the corner the car was pulling onto the road from, and pushing a part of her hair behind her ear, arms wrapped tightly around her as if she was cold. It was like she was waiting for someone to pick her up, though she always looked through the car as if it wasn't there, never acknowledging it. Whenever she was spotted as well, she would always do the exact same thing, like a video recording, and only ever at night. Once the car's headlights passed her, she would always be gone, though. Now, I never saw the girl myself, only my mother and uncle had ever seen her. I'd like to believe that their tales of seeing her were just a tell of a funny, spooky ghost story, but neither of them were very good actors, and my mum has always had car anxiety since getting into a crash in her teens, so it was always out of character for her to suddenly demand the car be stopped on a dime in the dark like that, and have my dad slam on the brakes, all because she saw the girl again. As for my uncle, well, he'd have no reason to come home from work late at night. He lived with us on and off throughout my childhood, and occasionally, but swiftly backing the car into the front yard, almost hitting the bushes just to shine the headlight into the neighbor's yard facing the pine tree, was really out of character. And I would say that this would be an excellent stunt for him to add legitimacy to the ghost story, if not for the fact that it was often well after midnight, and would have really no reason to believe that any of us kids were still awake to see the action. Still, as far as encounters my family has had, the idea of my mum and her brother occasionally seeing a girl who isn't there is rather mundane, I'll admit. But what gave me chills, though, was this. You see, 2 years ago, an unclaimed, heavily decomposed body was found back in my old hometown and reported. My mother caught wind of it and decided to tell my dad. Back when he was young, one of his uncles just vanished without a trace, and when bodies in the area pop up, he likes to call in to find out if it could possibly be his missing uncle. This body, though, was another dead end there, but triggered my mother to go looking into cold cases around the area, just out of curiosity. In real time, while she was scrolling, I saw her almost drop her phone and gasp as well, calling my dad to come quick. I had a thought for a moment that maybe she'd found my dad's uncle, or perhaps something worse, but worth the gasp. "That's her." She shoved her screen into my dad's face. "That's her. That's the girl who stands by our mailbox in the headlights." Looking at her phone was a black and white photo that perfectly matched the girl both my mother and uncle had described for the last almost 30 years now, down to the letter even. She was 19, lived a town over, and was last seen in my hometown in December of 1976. Her body was found 2 days later, having presumably died from multiple stab wounds found on her body. If this was a prank that my mother was pulling, having known about this earlier and only showing it now, 30 years is quite the long game to wait to pull that trigger. And once again, she is a terrible actor. I feel uncomfortable sharing the name of the girl as she still has living siblings according to Find a Grave, but strange things do indeed happen in this world. Honestly, I don't even know where to start with this. So I moved out of my parents' house 2 weeks ago, thinking that I'd finally have some freedom and space of my own. At first it was exciting, decorating, staying up late, no rules, but now I wish I'd never left. I just don't feel safe here. I don't feel alone. It started small. I'd put my keys on the counter, only to find them on the floor or in the fridge. I thought that I was just being forgetful, but then it got worse. One night I came home and all the cabinets in my kitchen were open, like every single one of them. I know that I didn't leave them like that, and then a few nights ago I woke up and noticed my closet door was open. I never leave that one open either. I swear that I shut it before bed as well, and as I stared at the dark space inside, I heard it. A soft, raspy breathing, so faint that it could have been my imagination, but I'm pretty sure that it wasn't. I pulled the covers over my head and stayed like that until morning. The next night I woke up to a noise under my bed. At first it was just a sort of low creaking, like the wood shifting, but then it escalated. A quiet scream, choked, gurgling, and desperate. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me freeze, and I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. When I finally got the courage to grab my phone and turn on the flashlight, there was nothing under there, but the shadows are the worst. At night, I'll wake up and see somebody in the doorway, just standing there, not moving, not blinking, and the first time I thought that it was just a trick of the light, but it's happened every night since then. Sometimes they're closer, like they're stepping into my room, and I cannot tell if they're real or if I'm just going insane, but last night I locked my door before bed, and when I woke up, the lock was completely broken. The door was wide open, and there were faint wet footprints leading into my room and stopping right next to my bed. This morning, I found something on my bathroom sink, a hairbrush, old, cracked with hair still tangled in it, and it was definitely not mine. I don't even own a hairbrush like that, but when I touched it, it felt damp, like it had been pulled from somewhere wet. In any case, I threw it out, but an hour later it was back on the sink again. I've started hearing whispers when I'm home alone as well. I can't make out what they're saying, but it's like they're coming from the walls, just low enough to drive me crazy, and I can't eat, I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I feel like somebody's watching me, and I just don't know what to do. I cannot stay here, but where can I go? My parents won't believe me. They'll say that I'm imagining it or being dramatic, but I know what's happening here. There's something here with me, and something that doesn't want me to leave. Something that wants me to stay, and every night it feels like it's just getting closer. And look, I don't even know why I'm sharing this, but maybe it's to make sense of things, or maybe it's just because I need someone or anyone to know what's happening to me. But since this morning, everything has spiraled out of control. I thought that staying out of the apartment would help, but no matter where I go, it feels like it follows me now. I woke up early at a friend's house, hoping for some peace. I didn't tell them what was going on. I didn't want to sound insane, but when I opened my eyes, their cat was sitting in the doorway of the guest room staring at me. Its fur was matted and wet, even though my friend swore that it hadn't been outside. And then I noticed a faint, damp footprint next to the bed. I decided to head home to grab some clothes and figure out my next move, but as soon as I stepped into that apartment, the air felt heavier. It was hard to breathe, like something was pressing down on my chest. The moment that I walked into the bathroom, I saw the mirror fogged up, as though someone had just showered in there, even though I hadn't been home. But I swear that I could make out in the condensation 3 words, and they looked like, "Don't fight it." I can't bring myself to sleep there anymore. The whispers have grown louder throughout the day, almost like they're trying to form words now. I don't recognize the language, but It's deep and guttural, like something choking on the sounds. It all came to a head a couple of hours ago, though, because I heard water dripping and thought that it was the kitchen sink, but when I walked down the hall, I saw a puddle forming. It led right to my bedroom, so I went in to check, obviously, and my bed was completely soaked. Sheets, mattress, everything. And in the middle of it was that hairbrush again. The same one that I've thrown away twice now. I don't know how it keeps coming back. I don't know how any of this is happening. I've kept all the lights on since this morning, but they've started flickering now. My phone battery drains faster than it should, and no matter how many times I check the time, it's like it just never changes. I called my parents earlier today, desperate for help, but the call dropped midway. When I checked my phone, the last call wasn't to them as well. It was to an unknown number. I don't remember dialing it. I don't even know how long the call lasted for. And so, right now I'm sitting in my car sharing this with all of you guys. I cannot bring myself to go back inside, but I can't stay out here much longer either. Every time I look up at the window, I see the shadow of someone standing there, I think, watching me and waiting. Something's going to happen tonight, and I don't know what it is, but I can just feel it. Whatever this is, it doesn't want me to leave, and I'm really not sure I'm going to survive even if I try. Whatever this thing is, it's not just haunting me anymore. It feels like it's taking me. Obviously, that's horrible to even think about, and quite honestly, I need to get out of here. This happened to me a few years ago now. So I was working overnight at the time. I was sleeping during the day, and in the middle of one of these sleeps, I was startled awake because I saw a dark figure standing next to my bed. By dark, I mean more like it was hard to tell what it looked like, but besides human and standing, if that makes sense. But in my groggy state, I could tell that it was holding like a bucket, as if it was just about to go and dump it on me. And I sat up in a rage, swinging at it like, "No, you won't." Grappling with it was futile though, because it was over my bed, so it had the height advantage, and it easily dumped the entire contents of the bucket over my head. I was super annoyed and aggravated, but I realized that the figure was gone. But I was completely soaked. My blankets were soaked and my bed was soaked as well. As I sat there becoming more lucid, I grew more horrified about how weird this actually was. My bedroom is tiny, my door was locked, I was alone in the house, nothing could hide under my bed or in my closet or anywhere else in my room, at least without me being able to easily spot it. I was also able to wring easily a full bucket of water out of my blanket, and it was so soaked that I eventually gave up on falling back to sleep, put it in the dryer with my bedding to get all the water out, and just stayed up. A giant puddle was on the floor as well of my room that I had to mop up. I smelled it too and stopped short of tasting it, but as far as I could tell, it was just regular, colorless, scentless water. Not sweat or urine or puke or anything. There's not enough room in my body for all this liquid anyway that a mysterious figure poured onto my head in the middle of the day while I was trying to fight to keep it off from doing that. No drugs, no alcohol, I wasn't mentally unwell or anything, and there were no pipes over my head or anything like that. I even climbed into the attic later to double check that. Sunny outside and it wasn't raining or anything. Eventually I went back to bed because I had work that night and I wanted to get some sleep. I told a few of my closest friends and they were all like, "Wow, that's crazy, but I'm sure that there's some sort of an explanation for it." Well, several years later, I still sleep in the same room and I still cannot explain it. This story takes place in 2016. My parents had just bought our first house in Cold Springs, Nevada. It was a beautiful house too, grand spanking new, and only one prior owner who was a religious nut and stayed in our driveway for a week after we moved in. My dad, he had to pull his pistol out at some point and tell him to leave the property, and that we were not going to pay for him to live in our front yard, basically. But that's besides the point. You see, growing up, we had always lived in an apartment. Not the worst apartment, but certainly not the best because, Reno, Nevada. But in 2016, we had moved into this brand new house, planted grass, done a new sprinkler line, and so on and so forth. But when we were moving in, we had the charter people over installing our internet cables, and we found this crawl space or attic in the laundry room. The charter guy came down while we were still moving stuff in and stopped my dad, and he said, "Excuse me, sir, I'm not trying to alarm you or anything, but in the rafters upstairs there appears to be a pair of woman's panties nailed to the rafters." My dad stops dead in his tracks and goes, "What? Excuse me?" He then asks me to put on a pair of gloves and to go and take a look, to which I do because at this time I'm like 16, 17 years old. And when I get up there, sure enough, on the rafters in the middle of the room, there's a pair of white woman's panties with a pink bow in the middle, nailed to the rafters, and they appeared to be used and really, really gross. My dad hands me a hammer and I pull the panties down, putting them in a trash bag and throwing them in the trash. Not thinking too much about it after the police department says that there's no sign of foul play. Cut to a couple of months later and things in the house start to get a bit weird, like cabinets opening on their own, the sound of footsteps in the hallway in the bathroom, and a weird groaning sound coming from the vent in the bathroom across from my bedroom. I tried my best to ignore it, but honestly it was hard to shake it. And one night I'm home alone playing on my Xbox when I hear noises in the kitchen. Growing up in Reno leaves you a little bit paranoid that tweakers are going to break into your house or something like that. So I grabbed my dad's gun from his bedroom and I started sweeping the house. I don't find anything in the end, so I put it back in its holster and start walking towards my bedroom. When I turn from the kitchen towards the hall leading to the bedrooms, that was when I see a woman in a dress. I nearly jumped out of my skin, and I screamed, and she seemed to run towards the laundry room. So I pulled my gun again and ran towards the laundry room, but when I did, I couldn't find her anywhere. There were no doors opened, no way that she could have climbed up into the attic. She was just gone. So, dumbfounded, I put the gun back, put my headset to full volume, and I just proceeded to play my Xbox like nothing happened. A couple of days go past, and I then start seeing her multiple times throughout the week. Cut to a few months later, and I say, I'm sort of done with this, and she's standing at the end of the hall staring at me at one point from towards the kitchen, so I just bulk up and I run at her. I expect her to do something, but instead she just vanished into thin air. I tell her to leave me alone and to just leave, and that she's not welcome in this house. I spend the next couple of weeks choosing to ignore any potential activity, just for the woman to never show her face again. Every once in a while, though, I would still hear sounds and moans, but nothing more than that, and the sounds in the bathroom completely stopped about a week after that, and I never saw her again. I moved out in 2020, and I left the state of Nevada and that experience behind. But lately, it's been sitting in the back of my head, so I thought that I should share it with all of you guys. Thanks for listening, and I hope you all enjoyed my interesting first home experience. When I was a child, my mother took care of my grandparents and we lived in the basement. At one point, my cousin lived there too, and we always had a creepy feeling that something was down there watching us. It was the usual stuff, I guess you could say. Cats staring at places that they normally don't, drapes moving with no air, just a general sense of unease as well. Now, for the longest time, we assumed perhaps that it was my great-grandma bound to her furniture below. But once our grandparents moved, and my mum moved upstairs, that's when we started having doubts it was something benevolent, or at the very least my nana's ghost wasn't alone. She started having nightmares of 3 faceless men yelling at her, verbally abusing her, telling her what a failure and how damned she was. I think as a child, not knowing any better, I talked to it and bonded to it even. A strange and chilling familiarity, if nothing else. Well, my mum meets her current husband at this time, a good man with the sixth sense, if you believe in all that stuff, as well as my stepsister. At this time, my mum had told no one about these nightmares, mind you. First night my stepsister is there, and she's young at the time. She points out to the window and says that there's a faceless man in the window. Well, we move out within a week, and as my mum's getting the last stuff, multiple doors just start slamming. I thought that it was just one basement door until this Christmas as well. We eventually moved out of state, but something was still attached to me. I'm not sure if it was the same thing, because it seems that the thing is sort of bound to that house, I guess, but I told a friend of my experiences and how the literal day before, something pushed really hard on my chest. Turns out she practiced Wiccan and performed a lot of removal spells. I had never felt that freed before as well, like it was actually gone. Well, about a decade goes by, and by then, the Slender Man thing had become a household name for horror. I showed my mum at some point because I was playing the game or whatever, and she immediately went pale. That was him, apparently, the faceless one. Now, over 7 years since showing her that picture, I've befriended another Wiccan or two, and one of them had a pendulum that could answer yes or no, and eventually, a line of questioning led to that thing, and it remembers us all. It apparently wants us to come back. My mum and stepdad moved back to the area, and every time my mum passed that road, she has to fight going down there. Present day, I have come to the region, past that street to the house, and also felt compelled to go down there, but I did nothing. This Christmas, I'm here about 30 minutes from the house, but I had nightmares last night, and they were of it. My stepdad has a dream catcher blessed by a native shaman to keep some ghosts off the property, but it feels like I'm close enough where it's just trying to get back. It can't get through for whatever reason, but I'm terrified after all of these years that it's trying to latch back onto me. Over the years, I've had a few paranormal encounters, I think even a trickster ancestor, and my mum's side's grandparents trying to guide me as well, but this, I don't know if it's my own fear or anger from the way the world is that is attracting it. Maybe it's all in my head, I'll admit that too, but since this morning I just cannot shake the feeling that it's trying to bind itself to me again. Like, the second that I leave this property, I just have this weird feeling, and I'm honestly terrified and I don't know what to do. We moved into our house nearly 6 years ago. There's extended family living with us, and when we first moved in, I noticed something angry or seemingly malicious in my kids' nursery. We had the Poltergeist works, shadow figures walking back and forth across the door, glimpses in the corner of someone standing there, kids later on saying somebody stands there at night, sometimes a muffled voice or footsteps if you weren't in the room. I took action when I saw our kids waking up with bruises, though. Things were getting thrown clear across the room, and finally I was run out of the room with my daughter by a shadow figure that leant directly into my peripheral vision. and all I felt was that get the heck out of my space sort of energy. I like to think that I handled it just fine. Holy water, sage, sachets in the four corners, and a heck of a lot of you don't gotta cross, but you can't stay here sort of lectures, and since then it left. Since then too, we've had a few separate incidences with other less angry spirits, I guess you could say, that I haven't had many issues with. Spirits and such things I can handle pretty easily, but that brings me to the reason that I've come here today. You see, at some later point we began to hear mimicking voices, the kind that pretend to be other family members and try to have you come toward them or get you to follow them upstairs or into the basement. It started with littleish things, like hearing the kids call out, or maybe an adult call us from upstairs that wouldn't reply when answered, hearing shuffling or voices in a separate room when you're definitely home alone. Things that we thought could maybe be regular spirits again, but then one day I saw, not heard, my brother-in-law come down into the kitchen. At first I flinched because I didn't hear him come down. No weight on the stairs, no footsteps, no clothes shuffling. He sort of appeared in my periphery and I turned to look at him dead on and he was there. He looked around the kitchen for a second. I asked him if he needed something, and he looked at me, waved and smiled in a way that gave me a weird feeling but was odd at best. He walked out quickly after that without a word or a sound. Moments later, I heard our bells on the front door jingle, and that same brother-in-law came in the front door, home from an errand, and I asked if he forgot something, and he said that he'd been gone all morning, which was backed up by other family members that he'd seen on the way dropping things off during said errands. After that incident, things ramped up as well, but we still hadn't seen another full body again. I also heard voices, and I saw figures standing at the front of our basement from time to time that seemed to be family members and would call us down to look at something. It began to give us uneasy vibes, I guess. The feeling of, like, personal danger. From there, though, I knew the rules. If you see something, no you didn't, don't acknowledge it, don't give it fuel. Let that person call for you more than once or twice before you go looking. I kept the kids near me whenever I heard anyone call for them that I wasn't sure that they were home right away, and always kept the kids from running to the front door if we heard the bells. After a while, it died down too, and we hadn't had much happen on the mimic front for a year or two now. I hear shuffling and movements downstairs every once in a while at night, but it cannot be taken seriously because we don't live alone, you know. We'd had banging on our front door twice from seemingly no one at 3 a.m, but other than those things, which might actually have been other people, we've had relative peace. Until last night, and today that is. You see, me and my husband and our friend who's staying with us were wrapping gifts last night. We kept hearing walking upstairs, to the point where my hubby was going to go up and check if the kids were up, because nearly every 20 to 30 minutes we heard something. Then, I saw a dark-haired kid's head pop out from over the arm of the couch in the playroom next to us. No sound, but it was fully opaque and swooped down as soon as I turned my head. My friend noticed it as well, and my hubby, funny guy that he is, threw a marker to check if it was a kid. Trust me, I know, but it was midnight and getting up again was not on the agenda for him. With nothing and no one reacting to the marker, we just went back to it. Then we heard my friend's baby crying every 10, maybe 15 minutes, and as soon as she would come back down, the baby would start again. When she'd run up to check, he'd be fast asleep, but her TV would be playing something else that wasn't what she had on. So we tried to finish quickly and just head to bed thinking that he was having night terrors in his sleep or something and would possibly wake his siblings, who were somehow still asleep in the bed next to the crib. My friend decided to stay with the baby while we cleaned to see if he'd cry again, and he never did. Anyway, as we're cleaning up and turning out the lights, that's when we heard coughing and shuffling in whatever room was next to us, especially so after all the lights were out as my hubby was helping me upstairs. I'm heavily pregnant and disabled, so he had to keep a hand on me in case I got dizzy. He said that he could hear the shuffling though and coughing in the rooms downstairs, getting closer to the stairs as we were going up it. It freaked him out to the point that he hurried me into our room and locked the door behind us. The nursery with our kids is connected to our bedroom, and so we knew that it couldn't have been the kids in their room making noise as we were coming up, and our friend said that her kids were fast asleep as we were coming up as well. Well, fast forward to this morning, and I woke up at 2 a.m. because I thought that I heard my kids walking around our bedroom, and that's fine, but I check and no one is in our room or bathroom, and they weren't up. And so I went back to bed. But this morning at 6:38, I woke up because I heard quick shuffling around the house, both upstairs and down. I watch my friend's kids while she works, so I figured that she had to go in early and I forgot or something. I sprang up as quickly as my belly would allow me and I went downstairs, but nobody was there. No one was awake, and I was too tired to remember that I was woken up by a movement down there, so I started to get myself some tea, and I then heard somebody talking over my shoulder on the stairs, like my friend bringing her baby down and talking to him quietly as usual. I was filling water for tea, so I hadn't turned, and then I heard her ask me something that I just couldn't make out, and I turned to clarify what she was saying. Only she wasn't there. At that, I was far more awake all of a sudden, and I remembered the night before and stayed quiet as I turned more lights on and sent her a text to see if she was awake. In the silence that followed, I heard the shuffling again in the playroom, but nothing more. I only got a reply about 10 minutes later saying that she wasn't awake but was coming down right then. She told me that it was because her alarms didn't go off and my text saved her for being late to work. That's when my hubby started texting in chat as well, saying that he'd heard the same things I was at the prior times that I'd mentioned. After that, the morning began a bit more normally, I guess you could say. The kids came down for food, and I kept them with me in the living room to allow my friend's other child to sleep. And yet, when she finally came down, she told us that someone had been knocking on her door to wake her up, and she was too scared to open it and check who it was. And not only is that out of character for her, but I know that we're home alone, and I had eyes on all the other kids the entire morning before that. Nobody left, not even for a bathroom break. So, long story short, mimics are outside of my experience. I need some advice on mimics and whatever I can do to deal with them safely, for my family and my kids' sakes. Any advice is helpful, and I don't know if things that I've mentioned and tried have ticked it off or if I'm doing the exact opposite of what I need to do, but I could really use some help because genuinely I am completely in the dark here. Back in 2005, I had an incredible experience that I would like to share. I kind of keep this to myself for, the better part of nearly 20 years. Pretty much because I'm just a normal dad with kids now and a career, and I don't want to, have any problems. But some things have happened when I was young that still stun me to this day, and this is certainly one of them. So, I attended a party in northern New South Wales, Australia, in the spring of 2005. These bush doofs were frequented by odd and usual people of different subcultures, but on this night, it was stranger than the usual ravers that I was used to. They were much more pleasant, much more friendly, I guess. At first, the party was relatively normal, like any other party of its type. Lots of electronic music, people dancing and enjoying the atmosphere. I was there with my girlfriend at the time, who was a bit of a free spirit and seemed to just know absolutely everyone at the party, which honestly wasn't unusual. She seemed to either develop instant chemistry with anyone or already just sort of knew people, and I never got to the bottom of that, but she and I mostly went our separate ways at parties like this and would just meet up randomly as the doof brought us back together. During the night at the party, I met a few interesting people though. This wasn't the first time that I'd met supernatural types or had strange experiences at a party like this, but it was the first time that it happened that I wasn't on drugs. The first one that I remember was a guy silently gesturing to me. I sort of didn't realize that he even was gesturing to me, so just sort of stared blankly until another guy grabbed me and he pointed to the ground where the dude was gesturing. As it turns out, the guy was trying to bring my attention to himself, seemingly manifesting a small energy orb, about the size of a marble at the tip of his fingertips, hovering about a few centimeters above the ground. It was translucent, almost like a bubble, but it was more dense and hovering perfectly still, and seemingly manifested by this guy. Or maybe he was just pointing at it. I'm not sure, but I know that I reacted with awe, as you would, right? And both guys were happy with my reaction. They sort of celebrated with each other and with me, without making many sounds. I continued to party. I mean, cool fun magic orb trick, right? Let's go. But the second one I met was when I was sitting by the open fire. She was sitting across from me, a pretty looking white woman with a short cropped brown haircut and a crochet beanie on her head. Relatively normal looking type of northern New South Wales raver, I guess. We caught each other's eyes and then suddenly I could hear her voice inside of my head. Well, not at first, but at first we had a brief conversation sort of telepathically without me realizing that it was even happening. I don't remember many of the talking points, but it was probably me thinking about how cute she was and her replying or whatever. When I first noticed it, she even laughed because I instantly rejected what was occurring and physically jumped a little bit. She must have reassured me pretty quickly because we sat there discussing something for a long time. Again, the words were taken from me, so I can't remember much of the discussion, but what happened next was pretty intense. She told me that she could do pretty much anything, and that I could as well while she was there. Pretty wild, right? Well, she evidenced it by reaching into the fire and picking up a handful, not a coal, but a handful of embers, and holding the fire in her hands. She did this with no pain, dropped it, or dismissed it, and then showed me no injury and told me to try. So I did, and it worked. She was, like the previous dudes, completely thrilled as well, and her joy actually was so palpable that it completely washed over me. It was, for a lack of a better way of saying it, an intensely euphoric feeling, paralyzing so, pure joy that just overwhelmed every one of my senses. And the next thing that I know, I'm being stirred awake by a random raver-looking dude, and it's dawn. I'm snuggled into a sleeping bag and under a tree, and I had the best night's sleep that I'd ever had. He gives me a small thimble full of hot brown liquid and gestures for me to drink it. He seems super awesome, so I do, and it tastes sort of like a coffee, but a bit different. Very pleasant, warming, and soothing. I get up and I notice that the party looks different. There are no cars around, nobody drinking, nobody passed out on the ground, nobody looking like post-doof regret partiers, just 20 or so very quiet, very peaceful people, and the DJ, and my girlfriend sitting with them on a rug as they cooked up a hot meal, some sort of stew or vegetable curry. So I walked over to her, but as I did, I noticed that more people were emerging seemingly from behind the trees in the forest that was surrounding the glade that the party was in. All of them were attractive, but not overwhelmingly so, I guess. Men, women, and children all emerged from behind the trees. I don't know how many, but the party picked back up and they basically just all started dancing with each other, being merry and all that. No talking though. Only me, my girlfriend, and the girl from the fire, who was now sitting next to my girlfriend, seemed to talk. I walked over to them and I must have had a look of shock or awe on my face or something, while both of them had a look of complete contentment and happiness, which definitely calmed me a bit. They gestured for me to sit down, so I did. They served me a bowl of food and I wolfed it down. Next thing that I know, I'm laying face down and completely incapacitated. All I remember now is feeling a mild static electricity in the back of my head. I eventually came to and sat up, and they asked if they could paint me, so I let them. They drew on me with dye or ink, and it was pleasant enough, I guess. Everyone was still having a good time, mind you, and it took what felt like maybe 15 minutes for them to finish. As soon as they did, the music stopped, people started retreating into the forest, their demeanor changed to almost hostile, and my girlfriend told me that we had to go. She almost dragged me out of the glade and down a small lane that quickly turned into the main road to the highway. Suddenly, all the hungover people in the cars were all visible again. We walked about a kilometer back to the main road and attempted to hitchhike to the nearest town, which took ages. Eventually, we finally got collected and I was able to look in the mirror, and they had painted me in the most incredible clown makeup that I'd ever seen. It was really impressive, to be honest, but I certainly felt like I'd been, I don't know, maybe mocked or maybe even laughed at, perhaps. Well, my girlfriend and I drifted apart not long after that, and as I said, this was a small part of a large series of events over a fairly long period, and my memory of the time isn't amazing for a number of reasons, but this night stuck out for obvious reasons. Also, I still had that clown paint on for quite some time after this, so that was confirmation for me that what I experienced there, it wasn't just a dream or just a hallucination. Something weird was going on, and I have no idea what it was to this day. About 4 years ago, I used to travel for work all over the province. Occasionally, I would work in the surrounding towns of where I grew up. I would stay in a house where my step-grandparents used to live, but my brother owns it now after they both passed. A lot of their stuff was still there, furniture and other belongings. My brother was barely even there, so didn't mind me staying there while I worked, and it was free lodging, so I figured why not. Now, my step-grandfather was not a good man. In fact, the reason that I moved away was because there was a court case where he pled guilty for horrible crimes, and I was placed in foster care and moved to a city. So it felt uncomfortable being in that house in that first place, but he was dead and I was older, so I gave it a try. The first day in that house, too, I took a bit of a tour. I closed my brother's bedroom door, and same with my nephew's, and I set up a camp in the living room, and then I went into the basement to turn on the water and the heat. When I went down there, I snooped around a little bit, just a bunch of boxes of their old stuff, and nothing caught my eye. I headed back upstairs, closed the basement door, and ate supper, and then I went to work. When I came back about 7 hours later, the bedroom doors and the basement door were open. Weird, but didn't freak me out too much. I told myself that it must have been me and I just forgot or something. I tried to rationalize it, I guess. I made supper, did a bit more work, and then settled in to watch a movie and go to bed. As I was laying in the dark, I felt like I was being watched, though. I got up and put some sheets over the deer heads that my brother had on the walls. But the feeling of being watched, it didn't go away. I didn't sleep much that night too, but I didn't hear or see anything. It was just a weird feeling. Anyway, the next morning I closed the door again, and I even locked the basement door. The basement had a lock on the outside, as in, if someone was in the basement, they couldn't get out. I went to work, and 9 or so hours later, I came back, and all the doors were open again. Now that was weird, because I knew that I had closed them this time. I went and wandered the house again, looking in all the rooms and braving the basement again even, but I didn't see anything weird. I certainly had a bad feeling in the basement. I went back and tried to relax a bit. That night I heard some noises in the basement, but I certainly wasn't brave enough to go down that night and take a look. The next day, though, I came up with a bit of a plan. This time I tied the 2-bedroom doors shut as they were in a corner, so I tied them together so that neither could open. I locked the basement door and put a few cases of beer that my brother had in front of the basement door, and I went to work. After work, I came back and those beer bottles were moved to the side, and the basement door was open again. I also looked at the doors, and the rope was untied, and the bedroom doors were open. At that, I was freaked out, and I drove the 3 hours back home to the city. I was telling some friends about how the house just didn't feel right, and I was worried that my step-grandfather's spirit or something was in that house. One of my friends was intrigued by this, and one thought that I was messing with them, but the next day we packed up a Ouija board, candles, sage, and a few other things. I brought those 2 friends, one a skeptic and one a believer. We drove the 3 hours down there, I gave them a tour of the house, and we set up a camp in the living room. After we got the board ready, we started, and I'll try to keep the story a bit shorter, but essentially we found out that there was a spirit attached to an object in the basement, apparently. Now, I've seen my fair bit of horror movies and knew that we shouldn't go down into the basement with the Ouija board and listen to a spirit, but, well, we went to the basement. The skeptic thought that we were just messing with him still at this point, and we head to the basement and set up the board on the top of the pool table. Once we started it back up, a weird smell like sewage filled the basement for a few seconds, and all 3 of us could smell it. Now, in the basement there were 2 pink walls and 2 green walls, so we asked the board if the object was closer to the pink wall or the green one. The board said the pink wall. I looked to my right, and right there staring at us was the vintage pink stuffed bear. None of us had seen it when I gave the tour, and I had not seen it any time that I went to the basement. I'd never seen it in my life, in fact. We asked if it was the bear, and it said yes. At this point, even the skeptic started to come around a bit. We asked what it wanted, and it said home. So what did I do? I walked over to this creepy stuffed bear, picked it up, and I headed back upstairs. We proceeded to ask some questions, and apparently its name was Sarah, and she was 12. I proceeded to bring the bear home, asking the pendulum some questions on the 3-hour drive home. Don't worry, we closed off the session with the board properly. I put this bear in my garage. I set her on top of the board on a table and headed inside for the night. The next day, I went out to the garage to check and grab my board to bring it back inside, knowing that I wouldn't want the bear inside the house if I didn't know that she was going to be safe. When I walked in, the Ouija board was on the ground out of the box, and she was there, still, sitting on the table. I had placed her on top of the box, but yet she was still sitting and the board was on the ground. Weird, right? Well, years have gone by, and I've moved twice since then and now no longer have a garage. For the first 6 months or so in the garage, things would move and go missing all the time. When she first entered the house, my dog wouldn't enter the room that she was in. I kept her in my craft room, away from the public area. My dog would sit and stare at the doorway, and finally I just went up to the bear and said, If you would like to stay in the house, I need you to stop freaking out my dog and get along and behave." The very next day, my dog entered that room with absolutely no issues. I now live on my own, and the bear is in my spare room. She's well behaved and nothing has happened in the years that I've lived here, and I still think that she's in there, but I have yet to find someone brave enough to talk with her again, and to be honest, I'm not sure I want to either. I had a pretty unsettling experience tonight at a cemetery nearby, and I'm curious if anybody else has encountered anything like this. So I visited my friend's grave at around 9:45 to 10 p.m. He was recently buried on Monday, and I've been visiting him every day since. I was by myself last night, Christmas Eve, with no issues, no strange feelings or sounds or anything. Everything felt pretty normal, and the tent from his burial was still set up, so I parked my car at the end of the cemetery, which is a place that you can drive through, and did the same tonight, on Christmas. I brought a friend along tonight, and we sat under the tent for a bit. I lit the same tea light that I left last night. Nothing strange happened, and we were just sitting there talking until around 10:05, when I said goodbye, and we started walking back to my car, and that's when things got a bit weird. You see, as we were walking, we heard growling and barking coming from the middle of the cemetery. We weren't sure what it was, but we kept walking towards my car. Then we see a large white dog, about the size of a large shepherd, but with patches or spots. It didn't approach us, but it was pacing back and forth, and the weird part was that it didn't seem like a normal dog. My friend heard it growling the whole time that we were walking back, and at this point we turned off our flashlights and started walking slowly, with my friend keeping his eyes on the dog while I kept my gaze on my car. The dog didn't move forward or toward us or seem aggressive or anything, but after a while it just sort of, well, for a lack of a better term, disappeared. Now, the cemetery is pretty open, and we were both watching it, so we don't know how it just vanished like that, but once we were in the car and I locked the doors, things took another strange turn. As I was backing out, we both heard a woman's voice scream help. It sounded like it came from near the cemetery, and we quickly left and we went to my friend's house where we noticed something. There were long, dragged finger marks on my car's trunk, and two very distinct, fresh fingerprints on the passenger side door. They weren't there when I first got into the car, and we certainly didn't stop to take pictures at the time, but it was pretty clear that something had left those marks. I don't know if it's related to the cemetery experience or maybe something else, but the whole thing was just really unsettling, and I don't know what to think about it. So, has anyone here ever experienced anything like this, especially the growling dog or the woman's voice? I'm trying to make sense of it, but I'm really not sure what to think about all of it. So if you have any insight, then thanks in advance. During the pandemic and lockdowns, I developed a bit of a habit of driving out to the country, aka the Ozarks in Missouri, in the wee hours of the morning. Honestly, it was great too. It felt like I had the entire country to myself at times, with not another living human around. Even driving from Springfield to Joplin on the interstate was pretty isolated, except for 18-wheelers, I guess. Now, I had a few paranormal encounters during this time, and this is one of them. So on one of these nights during the pandemic, me and my wife at the time were out driving around in the early morning near Springfield, Missouri. We were cruising the rural back roads and farm roads. We were getting tired and decided to take a quicker way home, so I ended up turning down this one dark road that I knew of. I smoke cigarettes, so I keep my window cracked. And all of a sudden I get this whiff of, and the best way to describe it is like rotting onions. We both started getting bad vibes, like we just shouldn't be here. I'm now looking for a side road or a driveway to turn around in, and no sooner than I get the feeling that we need to find a place to turn around is when we see a man limp running. The craziest thing is that he had on a dress suit and his head was pale white and no hair. Another thing that made it weird is that he never turned around or otherwise acknowledged that I was even there. He didn't move over, flinch, or anything. I had this gut feeling not to pass him. We ended up coming to another road and I took it. And this thing was probably 100 feet or 30 meters ahead of us. This happened around 4 in the morning. The road was dark and it was void of any street or traffic lights, except for my vehicles. He had no light on him that I could tell of. The only things on that road were a couple of houses and a cemetery about maybe a mile further than we were. Later that afternoon, I drove to that cemetery and there was a pickup truck with a man and a woman mowing the cemetery, giving me the evil eye. I never stopped, but I wanted to see if any ground had been disturbed. I know, there's no such thing as zombies, right? I'm not talking a parasitic or fungi type. It is impossible biologically for a decaying corpse to move on its own, from what I understand, but I just wanted to rule it out, I guess. I really don't know where the smell was coming from, but the odor was gone when I went back, and any other time that I've smelled something similar to that in a mausoleum. Anyway, I have no idea what was going on, but it was creepy nonetheless. So I'm generally pretty skeptical about cryptids and the like, but I've recently had some experiences that I cannot seem to explain. I've been an avid outdoorsman my entire life, and I've spent countless hours in and around the woods, and this one just has me stumped. So, this all took place in the mountains of western Montana over a 2-week time span. I was out having a campfire in a relatively secluded location with one of my friends when we noticed a random light from off in the woods. I didn't think too much of it at the time, but we noticed it moving around a bit, so we just sort of chalked it up to a late-night hiker with a headlamp. But considering our location and the time of night, it just didn't feel comfortable staying around, so we left. A couple of days later, I returned to the same spot alone, and I didn't see any lights at first, but after about an hour they showed up again, in roughly the same direction, but this time there were 3 lights. The weird thing though was that they all moved in sync, bobbing up and down and getting closer and further away, all in unison. I decided to walk towards them to see if it might have just been a sign reflecting a light that I hadn't noticed or something, but as I approached, they seemed to be getting further away, maintaining roughly 300 yards of distance between me and them. So in the end, I just turned around and left the area. Then, a few days after that, I returned to the same place, this time at around 2:30 in the morning, but I just couldn't shake the feeling of paranoia that had overcome me this night, seemingly from the minute that I showed up there. At about 3:45, I heard a single noise too that sounded like a whistle, but just a single note, and nothing crazy, but it sounded far off and deep into the woods. So I dismissed it as just a bird or some other small critter, but about 20 minutes later I heard more whistling, this time a genuine tune that lasted about 15 seconds and sounded no more than 50 yards away. At that point, I said to heck with this, and I bolted to my car and I left. I haven't been back since, and maybe I'm just being paranoid, as there has been a camper murdered in that area not too long beforehand, but this has been my creepiest experience in the woods since, well, as long as I can really remember. But what do you guys think? Is there anything in the area that could explain these encounters? And if there is, what is it? Also, for reference, here's the picture of the lights that I saw on that second day. We moved around a lot when I was a kid. The first time there was any sort of ghost or Hatman figure mentioned around me, I was only a few months old. We were in a women and children's refuge, and my older brother and I shared a room while my mum had her own. And one night, my brother goes into my mum's room and wakes her up, crying and yelling, "Bad man," thinking that it was my dad, which is unlikely as he didn't actually want me. My mum goes into the room and she sees the window open and me on the floor beside it. I was too young to be able to leave my cot, and my brother couldn't have been able to reach me at this age either. It's important to note that we were in a refuge because my dad was abusive to my mother, not because he had any interest in trying to take us away from her. But later on we moved twice more. The second time we stay in this house for like 5+ years, and after a few years, I begin to feel this presence watching me. It's usually in the hallway leading to the kitchen or in the kitchen directly. I'll be washing dishes and I'll hear footsteps behind me, but when I turn around, there's no one ever there. And listen, we have wooden floorboards, so it's very easy to tell where the footsteps are behind you based on the creaking and all that. They sound like someone had just walked into the kitchen, but then there's just nobody ever there. I felt breathing down my neck at this stage. There's always especially been this sense of like watching, and for a reason that I cannot explain, I feel as though it's not malevolent. I've never felt very afraid by it, I guess, but it feels like this entity is just watching to make sure the house is running well and things are getting done. I've never seen a ghost or anything with my own eyes, but when I think of this ghost, a certain image always comes to mind. I can't imagine him any other way. I mean, he's tall and mostly made of shadow, but he also wears a hat like a fedora. Now one day, I was talking to my mum about it, wondering if she'd seen or felt anything, and she said yeah, actually. She'd been having dreams sometime about a man who was tall, and I said, wearing a hat? And she goes, yeah, like a fedora? That was freaky. Now recently, I saw online about people seeing the Hatman during sleep paralysis and stuff. I've never had that, and also I don't have like schizophrenia or anything either. I know some people might chalk it up all to like trauma or whatever, but I know my trauma responses by now, and my mum knowing exactly what this ghost thing looked like was weird. I mean, the fact that it matched up perfectly with the image that I had in my own head. I've seen a few psychs over the years, and I've had no experiences with hallucinations or anything, and I have a good card of health, so I really just don't know what to think about it. About 3 months ago, on my usual daily walk, I was walking that day in the evening. I was at a road in my village where new houses were being built, and as I was walking, in front of me, a dark, solid black arm from below the elbow, including the palm and fingers, was running from my right to the left. Then it went under a metal sheet, and it made a noise, so I knew that I wasn't imagining things, and disappears. Well, jump to a month ago, I was in bed, scrolling on Reddit before going to sleep. After a while, out of nowhere, I feel and see my blanket moving and rise by my left leg. Then a hand grabs my left leg, firmly holding it tight. I shook my leg strongly, instinctively, and as I moved my leg, I felt it kick a hand, I would guess. Now, I know that this is going to sound a bit insane, but I shook it off and continued scrolling. The reason for this reaction was because, well, I'm pretty much used to the paranormal stuff happening to me now. For example, not related to this story, but I was at a friend's house and we were outside chilling and talking at like 3:30 in the morning. I was on a couch facing the kitchen, and I saw a shadow figure, black but transparent, like it was black but you could see through it. I tell my friend to look and to see if he sees what I'm seeing, and he goes completely white. Mind you, he's a complete skeptic. At that moment was absolute confirmation for me that I'm sensitive to these things and not just seeing stuff. That wasn't my first rodeo, obviously, but that was the first time that somebody else saw what I clearly saw too. I'm a 36-year-old female in Sweden. I've worked in mental health care for the last 18 years, mainly with people with psychotic illnesses like schizophrenia. I was working in a group home for 9 years and was very close with my co-workers there, especially 2 females. The last few years I worked there, another female started working there too. Her name was M, and the 4 of us grew very close. She was very timid, shy, friendly at times, and we got along pretty well. She was, however, often on long-term sick leave because of her own mental health issues, so we didn't meet much at work, but she always showed up at our after-work dinners, so we continued to stay in touch, even when she wasn't well enough to work full-time. She told us that she had a history of schizophrenia herself, just like the patients that we were treating, but that she was medicated and hadn't had any psychotic episodes for years. Now, since I have an education in psychiatry and a long experience with schizophrenia, I have no judgment towards people suffering from the illness, and it didn't bother me being friends with someone who had a diagnosis like that. And even after what I tell you, I still feel the same way. In the summer of 2023, I had moved on to work in a new place, also with mental health, but this time forensic psychiatry, like a halfway house for mentally ill murderers, etc. The 4 of us stayed in touch and still met every now and then for dinner parties and whatnot. Em told us that she had been evicted from her apartment because of an incident where she had accidentally entered her neighbor's apartment in the middle of the night. She told us that in the huge apartment complex, the doors all looked exactly the same, and that she simply walked in the wrong door by accident, and that the neighbors, they'd created a bit of a scene out of pure drama and reported her to the police. I somehow felt that while that sounded out of proportion to evict someone just from that perhaps the landlord took that kind of action because he judged her based on her medical history, and I felt honestly bad for her. I questioned her if something else happened, and she claimed that it didn't and that this was the full story. In Sweden, it's very difficult to get a contract for an apartment when you've gotten evicted before. You pretty much get blacklisted and that's that. So Em asked if she could move in with me. Since she was literally on the street, literally homeless, I said, well, of course you can. I've always gotten myself into uncomfortable situations by saying yes instead of thinking about myself, and had no idea just how severe this situation would get when I said yes to him. So I live in a pretty small apartment. It's 1 bedroom that pretty much only fits a bed and a desk, a living room that fits a couch and a TV, no room for an extra bed, a small kitchen and a small bathroom, and I have 2 cats too. We decided that Em was going to live in the living room, and I offered her to throw my couch out so she could have a bed there, but she said that she was fine with sleeping on the couch since it's comfortable enough. I insisted on giving her a bed, but she always declined. There's a door between the living room and the bedroom too, but between the living room and the hallway, there's just an open arch, so she wouldn't have total privacy by any means. But I hung up a thick velvet curtain covering the arch, so at least that gave her the sense of a door and more privacy than nothing. There's another door from my bedroom to my kitchen too, so I have 2 doors to my bedroom. I have to have one of them open at night since my cats want to go in and out, and they also have their litter boxes in the bathroom, and food and water in the kitchen. I naturally kept the kitchen door open and not the living room door, since that's where Em lived and we wanted to keep our privacy somehow. She wasn't working at this time because she was on one of her long-term sick leaves. This while I was working shifts, so sometimes I had to get up at 6 a.m. and sometimes I didn't get home until like 11 p.m. I have really severe insomnia too, and I need to combine medication to just get to sleep. And even with this, I still wake up easily. I told her that I would appreciate if she could try to stay quiet those nights when I have to get up at 6 in the morning. but that it's fine if she's loud when I'm at work or when I'm doing the evening shifts because then I don't need to sleep as much. Now, she was a heavy smoker and a coffee drinker, so I bought her a coffee machine. Yeah, I know, I'm a bit of a weirdo who doesn't drink coffee very often, so I didn't have one. But I did this to make her enjoy her living situation a little more. The coffee machine in the sink is placed right outside of my bedroom door. Like I said, the kitchen is pretty small. So the first night together, I had to get up at 6 for my shift. As usual, I had a hard time falling asleep. Em had been up several times that night to go out to smoke, and I woke up every single time. At 5 a.m, she started making coffee, and since it's literally outside of my bedroom door, I was wide awake from the sounds of it. I asked her in the nicest way possible why she was up this early, asking if she had any plans today. I mean, she's on sick leave, so why not sleep at 5 a.m. if you can? And she just said that she couldn't sleep. I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. I would just appreciate if you could wait with making the coffee till 6 a.m. since I really need this last hour of sleep because of work." Also, adding to why I need my sleep is that I have epilepsy that gets really bad when I don't get enough sleep. I usually get lots of seizures when I don't get at least 4 hours of sleep. I knew that I would probably get seizures at work now, meaning that this day would be both stressful and potentially dangerous for me since there's a huge risk that I fall and hurt myself. And it's really not a good thing to get cramps and seizures among mentally unstable criminal clients who you're supposed to care for. And look, I know it's not an ideal situation to work in that field with my condition, and I can inform you all that I did quit after only 6 months. Anyway, she said that she really wanted a coffee with her cigarettes, but that she would try to wait the next time that I have to work. I accepted it, and I went on with my day, but things just didn't get any better. She continued to wake me up early in the morning and through the nights, and continued to promise to stop, but insisted that she really wanted coffee with her cigarettes. I suggested making the coffee the night before or drinking iced coffee or Coke instead, but she didn't want that. I should add too that she demanded for me to be silent at 10 p.m. because that's when she wanted to sleep, and genuinely I respected that. She used to get these moments of binge eating too, where she would empty my fridge and pantry from everything that I had. I remember this one time when I bought a big loaf of bread, and she texted me 30 minutes after I left the apartment saying, "Hey, I'm sorry I ate your loaf of bread. I'll buy it back once I get money." Like an entire loaf of bread in 30 minutes. I had told her when she moved in to feel at home and what's mine is yours, so I couldn't really get mad at that, but it did start to annoy me for 2 reasons. I mean, it was getting kind of expensive since it was such huge amounts, and it was always in inconvenient times of the day, like after an evening shift when the store was closed and I came home hungry, and she had emptied the kitchen from literally everything that I had bought the same day. Em also had long black hair that was absolutely everywhere, all over the sink, the floor, the bathtub. I'm no clean freak, but I think anyone could understand that this isn't the nicest thing to step into or see everywhere in your house. She also left her fingernails and toenails on the bathroom floor. There were also pee drops on the toilet seat every time that she had been to the toilet too. I saw a silverfish on my bathroom floor. Never ever seen one before. They eat hair and skin and nails and whatnot, so I figured that this fella probably enjoyed life because of the new dirty conditions my bathroom was in. At first, I didn't want to say it straight out because I thought that it would hurt her and I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. So I just put a broom and shovel in the bathroom to imply that we needed to sweep the floor more often. This didn't seem to work, so after a while, I told her in the nicest way possible with a smile on my face, "Do you think we could try to clean the floor in the bathroom more often? We tend to lose some hair when we brush it, and I'm afraid that we might get pests. I saw a silverfish the other day, and I don't want it to get worse." I always made sure to say we instead of you, so she wouldn't feel attacked, and she promised to think about it, but nothing changed. Now, I started dating a guy around this time, and was head over heels for him. He was also in a roommate situation, so we had a tough time getting any alone time. I asked Em if there was any chance that we could get one night to ourselves every now and then in the apartment, and that she, of course, would get the apartment to herself as well. She didn't like the idea and claimed that she had nowhere to go, no friends or family. Now, I wasn't asking her to leave for 24 hours or anything, just a few hours so we could just get some quality time together. She could just go to the library or take a walk or whatever. I mean, I was at work for like 8 to 10 hours, 5 days a week, so she got a lot of time to herself. One of our old co-workers realized that this was really tearing at my mood, to never get any time for myself, and I started feeling really suffocated. She offered that Em could stay the night at her place. After all, they were friends too. Em said that she didn't want to bother her, but we told her that she didn't. They're friends. She's more than welcome. And I really just want one night to myself and my guy, after all. I didn't understand why she made such a big deal over leaving me and the apartment for just one night. She eventually accepted and spent the night there, and I spent the night away the next week so that she could go and get more alone time too. And when I came home the next morning from my night away, I saw that my cat's water bowl was completely dried out. There was no spill on the floor, and it looked like it had been wiped out with a towel or a paper or something. I had filled it up to the brim just the night before. I asked her how this was possible, and she said that the cats must have tipped it out, but there was nothing on the floor, like I said. But my cats are overly social and usually cuddle up with strangers after just a few minutes, and I noticed that the cats withdrew from her more and more over time, and the last couple of weeks, they never left my bedroom except from when they ate or used the litter box or whatever. It honestly seemed like they were scared of her, which I couldn't figure out since she was just so timid. I had this old saucepan from the 60s that meant a lot to me too. You probably wonder how a saucepan can mean a lot to someone, right? But it was my grandmother's, and it's really the only thing that I have that belongs to her. My mother used to cook for me with it when I was little, so it has a great nostalgic value to me. She burnt it one day and made no attempt to clean it. She left it on the stove and went out to smoke. I found it ruined, and I cried that day. She didn't even say that I'm sorry. She also broke dishes several times and didn't bother to replace them or apologize. This added to my frustration with her naturally, and it had been probably, 2 months had gone by now, and she kept waking me up at night, kept binge eating my food, never cleaned, never left the house, scared my cats and ruined my things. I realized too that she stole my prescripted sleeping pills at one point, lots of them as well, and I only get one per night, not more or less, and as you already know, I really need them. I had 20 of them in my nightstand when I left for work, and when I came home, they were gone. She denied this, which is pretty hilarious since nobody else could have been there. But my frustration was getting heavy. The summer heat was strong, and I felt locked up in my tiny bedroom with my 2 cats, never getting any time to myself, never any time alone with the guy that I was dating, except for once every 14th day. My apartment was messy, and she was stealing from me. All of this was beginning to culminate. But one day, out of nowhere, my old elementary school classmate texted me on Facebook asking me how I know Em. He had seen that I had posted on Facebook that we were roommates now. I told him that we were old co-workers and that she needed a place to stay because she got evicted. He said, "I know, but do you know why she was evicted?" Yeah, she accidentally went into her neighbor's apartment. He said, "That's not the full story. She broke in and snuck up to their sleeping baby with a knife in her hand, but luckily the father woke up and wrestled her down and managed to save the baby. Thankfully nothing happened, but it was definitely a close call." I felt sick to my stomach. Could this be true? It would certainly explain why she was evicted, but it just sounded so horrible. And she is such a timid, nice girl. I had so many questions. But my friend had the full police report. Apparently the couple that Em had broken into was his ex-girlfriend and her family. It seemed that Em had a psychosis episode during the break-in, but those parts weren't public. It was, however, clear to me that she had been lying to me about why this had happened, and about how long she had been mentally unstable for. I started getting quite paranoid now, and I was already very frustrated with everything, and it was around this time that I really wanted her to move out. We did, however, have a contract that she had 30 days notice, and I knew that if I asked her in a harsh way that it would mean 30 days of chaos until she moved out. So I wanted to handle this as nicely as I could. I started looking for cheap hostels for her that I could suggest to her so she wouldn't be on the streets. I sat down with her and told her that I loved living with her and I feel really horrible for this, but I just miss my alone time and that the apartment is too small for 2 people. I said it wasn't personal and that I wouldn't want to live with anyone right now and that I wished it would have worked out and that I'm really sorry and hope that we can still remain friends. She looked absolutely crushed and said that it wasn't possible. I showed her the hostel that I found and said that I understood that it wasn't the ultimate situation, but I really needed her to move out because I felt suffocated, and also the summer heat was making it tough to always have the door to the bedroom closed, and that it was tough for me to not get my sleep, etc. She said okay. She was going to try and move out, but not until 30 days had passed, and I said of course to this. The first night after our talk, she got up and made her coffee at 2:30 in the morning. I nearly had a mental breakdown that night. I was going to get up at 6 and I couldn't go back to sleep. I asked her in the morning for probably the 10th time to not make coffee until I get up, but she didn't even answer me that time. She just sat in the sofa and stared out the window. I said, "Em?" and she kept staring. I was a little bit freaked out by that, but I left for work. She kept being weird though, kept making a mess, kept waking me up, kept eating my food, and all I could think about was the incident with her and the baby and the knife and all that. I eventually got so ticked off about being woken up by the coffee maker, I plugged it out and stored it in my attic, which she had no access to. It may have been childish, I know that, but I was just genuinely getting so tired at this moment. My sleeping pills were stolen and I was starting to feel like Edward Norton in the beginning of Fight Club. Well, the next night, I woke up at 4 a.m. by her making coffee in a saucepan. Not my grandmother's saucepan, thankfully. That one was ruined. I tried talking to her again, explaining the situation, but she just stared and didn't reply. Me being frustrated and on the tipping point, took the saucepan and stored it in the attic as well. I know, but I was going crazy and just wanted her to stop with this nightly coffee routines and to just get the hint. The third night, I had the guy that I was dating sleeping at our place because I was getting really paranoid now over her weird behavior, not speaking with me and just staring into space. I woke up from my very light snooze by him poking me, and he whispered, "Look." And in the doorway, Em was just standing silently, staring at us. Honestly, this was like a scene from a horror movie, with her long black hair over her face. I kid you not. I didn't say anything at first, because I wanted to know if she just stood there for a second doing something by the door, but I realized after a while that she was actually just standing still staring at us. It reminded me of the ending of Paranormal Activity when Katie just stares at Micah in the final scene. So I sat up and said, "What are you doing?" But before I could finish the sentence, she just slammed the door shut, and I heard the sound of something metal falling on the floor and her running into the living room. I yelled out, "You need to leave," and started crying hysterically because this was turning into a nightmare. Of course, I didn't go back to sleep that night, and I was really happy that I had company that night too. I just kept asking myself, had she done this before? Stared at me in my sleep like that? The next day, when I got out of bed, I opened the door that she had slammed shut and saw a kitchen knife on the floor. So that was the metal sound that I had heard before she ran off that night. At this point, I took all of my knives and locked them in the attic as well. I then asked a friend of mine to come to my house and be here when I tell her that she has to move out immediately, that I can no longer wait 30 days. We were 27 days in. And during the conversation, I really tried to stay calm. I know that she has a mental illness. I know that she means no harm. And even though I was just so frustrated, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. I was mostly scared and tired, I guess, but she, however, didn't even answer when I talked to her. She just kept staring at the window. She left the apartment and she sent me a text instead, saying that I was disrespectful for bringing a friend over to her place. I came and I thought that this would be a quiet night finally. No coffee maker or saucepans. But at 3 a.m. I woke up by her burning dry coffee powder in a frying pan. At this moment, I just felt terrified of her. Her face was dead, her eyes were black. I suspected that she had gone into psychosis. I stopped the fire and she just ran off to the living room in silence. I knew that she had an appointment with her psychiatrist the next day. While she was away, I packed all of her things. I then sent her a text telling her that she needs to pick them up and give me back my keys, and that I'll give her money for a hostel the upcoming 26 days. She didn't reply, though. The guy that I was seeing came to keep me company in case she would fight about it. She didn't. She left the keys without looking at us, and she just left. Our co-workers who were friends with us both told me that she moved in with a guy that she was dating apparently, and she stayed there for a few weeks until she somehow amazingly got an apartment of her own. She started working again, and genuinely I was really happy to hear this. She seemed to be doing pretty well. Then, in January of this year, one of our old co-workers told me that Em had called her and told her everything must burn, that she has a baby that she must save, and other delusional stuff. She had called 112, Swedish emergency number, like 911, about this, but they hadn't taken it seriously. Em had then proceeded to burn her entire apartment down because the voices in her head were telling her that she has to burn everything to save her friends and family. Her neighbors had tried to rescue her from the fire, but she had fought them off and ran back in and poured liquor on the fire to make it burn more. She was arrested and sentenced last week for aggravated arson. She'll serve her time in a mental institution or prison for a long time, possibly forever even. What's ironic is that she will probably be in the facility where I used to work and end up where she used to work herself. My old co-worker was a witness at the trial, and apparently she had stopped taking her medication because she thought that it made her feel numb, and she thought that she was stable enough to function without it, but obviously not. She had also stopped taking her medication the last few weeks when she stayed at my house, so when she stared blankly into space, she was going into psychosis. When she stared at me with a knife in her hand, when she burnt the frying pan that last night too, she was in a state of psychosis. It's really disturbing to think about what could have happened to me and my cats if she would have stayed too, or if I had been a heavy sleeper. I also think about what would have happened to that baby that she snuck into before she was evicted. And yeah, I know it's crazy that I didn't just throw her out by then, but it was very complicated. The reason why I haven't been able to talk about it with my friends is because they sympathize with her and have minimized my experience, and they think that I'm making a bigger deal out of it than it actually has been. I sort of understood it too, since they have never seen that darkness in her eyes that I saw that last couple of days. So really, I can't blame them, I guess. Also, I remembered something recently too that I wanted to add. There were several times when I was going to work early in the morning that she occupied the bathroom by taking long baths. I patiently tried to wait until the last minute before knocking and asking her if she could get up and get back in after I had gotten ready and left for work. It's just another thing that added to my frustration. I fell really ill one time when she was staying here too. I don't know at the time what it was, but I woke up in the early morning one day feeling very nauseated. On my way to the bathroom, I literally almost had a heart attack and threw up at the same time because it takes like 10 seconds to get to the bathroom, so you can imagine how bad it was when I didn't even make it. And I had a really high fever and kept throwing up, and I was just a mess. Obviously, you would understand too that you would want your bathroom to yourself at this point. Actually, I think it's pretty understandable that you'd want to be completely alone when you're just this ill, right? My head was spinning, and I'm guessing I was nearly hallucinating from the high fevers. But one random thing I laugh about today is that it was Eurovision week, and for some reason the flute solo from Moldova's song was stuck on repeat in my head while I was in and out of fever dreams. I have a hard time listening to it today because of this, but anyway, working in healthcare, I also have a natural instinct of not wanting to spread infections, so my first thought was that besides wanting to be alone, I didn't want to risk giving whatever this was to Em. So I begged her the moment that I noticed I was ill to please leave for her own sake. I mean, I could barely speak because it made me throw up that easily, and our friend in common had asked her to water her plants that week, so she had the keys to her place and could have been alone there. But Em refused to leave, and I swear if I had the energy to slip out of the window and to fall to my death, I would have, but I couldn't. Anyway, I was half sitting or half laying on the toilet with a bucket on my lap, my head sort of resting in the bucket of puke because I just couldn't hold it up with the high fever, and I just begged through whispers for her to leave so she wouldn't be as ill as I was too. I told her, "What if you get sick soon too? We can't share the toilet. I'll be here all day. You should go to her place before it's too late, please." Eventually, she left, really ticked off at me. It turned out that I had a severe case of food poisoning, and I was well again after 2 days, but man, the fact that she refused to leave is something I felt I had to add to the story because it just made me so frustrated. Also, that reminded me that she used to shut my cats inside of my bedroom while I was away at work or whatever. She did this so that they couldn't eat, drink, or use the litter boxes. She claimed that she just recently closed it because she was trying to sleep, but I remember that she did it in the middle of the day one time, the last few days too, so she was lying about that for sure. Anyway, I could genuinely just go on and on about this whole situation, but that's the story, and thankfully, I survived. I'm Tom, and I'm 42 years old, male. This happened in 2018 in Queensland, Australia. So I was heading on a hike to Lamington National Park with a woman that I was seeing for a few months at the time, Belinda. She brought along her 2 boys, 10 and 12. I had met them a few times, but this was going to be a good bonding experience to see how we get along on an overnight adventure. I really liked Bea, and I wanted to get serious with her. There was a lot of counting on this too. My old boy used to bring me up to this campsite called Binabura. Our favourite hike was the Kumara circuit. You start on the top of the mountain with all of the views, then descend down into the valleys, where there's lush forest, waterfalls and whatnot. Stunning place, teeming with an abundance of beautiful colourful birds, reptiles, these bright blue yabbies that lay scattered along the tracks, fireflies, and a multitude of leeches and ticks. Now, the drive from Brisbane was good, and the boys loved the drive up the mountain. Belinda, not so much. She apparently has a fear of heights, I learned. There were on and off showers, and the track was slippery, but we packed ponchos, and the kids were having a blast as we set off on our track. We booked a safari tent up near the lodge, and everything seemed to be going perfectly for our weekend getaway. But we were about halfway through the hike when the youngest boy slipped and hurt his knee as we were crossing a creek. It was only a graze, but I think the shock of getting a bit wet and the panic made him a bit more emotional, and he was crying for a bit. I cleaned up the scrape and put on some band-aids, and decided to carry him on my shoulders for a bit until he felt better. Belinda was acting quiet, and I thought maybe she wasn't enjoying herself. She was laughing and joking around just before this. I thought maybe I did something wrong, or she was upset her son got hurt or something. I asked if she was good, and she nodded and smiled, and went along gazing around quietly. We started heading up the mountain for a bit, and as we were walking, we could hear something thundering through the trees toward us. Branches snapping, loud bangs, impacts. We look up the hill to see a large stone the size of a basketball flying down just ahead of us on the trail. We watched as it bounced across our path, hitting into a tree and continuing down the hill. I warned everybody to watch out because sometimes with erosion, rocks can fall. I was honestly a bit shaken by that too. I mean, a rock that size, it could easily kill someone if it hit them. We continued walking though, keeping an eye on the trail above for more rocks and debris as we zigzagged up and around the mountain. And only 5 minutes later, another rock came crashing down. This one was further away, but it was followed by another that was coming right toward us. We had plenty of time to get out of the way, but if we weren't paying attention, I mean... When the third came, I knew something was up though. This wasn't right. Someone was throwing these rocks down the mountain. It didn't feel like a natural occurrence by any means. The way they were spread out, it just didn't make any sense. I shouted up the mountain that if it was someone doing that, to stop, that there were hikers. In response, another rock flew down toward us. I screamed out that they were going to kill someone and that we had children with us. 2 more large boulders crashed down the hill, leaving a trail of destruction. We heard shouts of another 3 or 4 people. Another group of hikers further down the hill shouting out the same complaints at us. A man ran up ahead until he was in shouting distance and called out to us. Another stone came crashing down, and by this point the kids were crying and Belinda was shaking. I told them to stay there and that I would run up ahead, and I did just that. I started running up the hill until I couldn't breathe any longer. I reached where the zigzag ended and continued along the mountain ridge, and when I did, no one was there. I went up and down the trail until I reached an elderly couple sitting on a bench at a lookout. I talked to them for a few minutes, asking if they saw anything or any other hikers. They said that they hadn't, that they had come from the opposite way and hadn't seen anyone for ages. A guided tourist group a few kilometers back the other way, but too long ago to be the culprits by any means. I went back down to Belinda and the kids. By this time they were with the other hikers, and we did the last long leg of the journey together. We caught up with the old couple as well near the exit. Once we left the group with some of the other hikers bombarding one of the rangers, we headed toward the shower blocks. Belinda pulled me aside once she had the kids organized, and she told me that she didn't want to stay there overnight. I was a bit shocked by that. Earlier when we arrived, she said that she loved the safari tents and we had plans to sit around the fire and have a nice barbecue dinner and all that. So I asked her why, and she said that she didn't feel comfortable. I assured her that no one would try messing with us around the campsites, and it was probably just some stupid teenagers, and they wouldn't be a nuisance up here at the campgrounds and the lodge. Stupid teenagers within a year of this burnt the lodge to the ground, by the way. But she told me she didn't think that it was teenagers. I asked her why she thought that, and she said that when her boy had slipped in the water and was crying, she said that she thought that she saw something. She said that it was big and brown, and when her eyes first scanned past it, she thought that it was just a part of the forest, like a log or a rock. But as she moved her eyes past it again, it moved. This thing, she said, was bigger than me and hairy, but also covered in moss and grandfather's beard and leaves, so it definitely blended in. She said that she only saw it for a moment, but that she swore by it that it was unmistakable. She said that she only saw it for a moment, so she just brushed it off as just a trick of the mind. She said that she knew it wasn't, but she was trying to convince herself as we walked. I asked her why she didn't say anything, and she told me that she didn't want to scare the kids. Then went on to say that after the rock thing, she was even more freaked out. I didn't know what to think, and I have to admit I acted a bit pouty with her, which she was not impressed by. After we had showered and dressed, she told the kids that we were going home tonight. They seemed disappointed, but didn't put up too much of a fuss. I mean, the afternoon had pretty much rattled them, and It was a quiet drive home, and the kids were asleep by the time that we reached the bottom of the mountain. I drove them home and apologized to Belinda for the trip not working out that great. She was in brighter spirits now that we were off the mountain and thanked me so much for the day and for planning such a special weekend for her and the kids and all that. We ended up seeing each other more and more and eventually moved in with each other, and we got married this January. Now, after some time has passed, my wife and I have talked this over again, and we have 3 working theories. 1, it was some pesky teenagers hiding off the trail. 2, that friendly old couple wasn't as friendly as they seemed. Or 3, there's something weird and big up in those mountains, and it likes to throw rocks at hikers. My wife is set on the fact that it's option 3. I'm heading closer toward option 2. I did some research though and told her that if it was a Bigfoot creature, she should have smelt it and that the smelliest thing out there was her feet. In conclusion, we usually choose the beach over bushwalks now, regardless of whether it was people or unknown cryptids. It kind of spoiled the fun of taking my family out for hikes in one of my favorite places in the world. I might go back one day, probably just by myself. I've done those hikes countless times before with no issues, but you best believe that I'm going to be keeping a very good lookout for big, hairy mountain men. It's the early 90s. I was 6 years old at the time, living with my parents and brothers in a duplex. The events of the night are still burned into my memory all these years later. To get a feel for the house, we were in an end unit of the duplex and had a sliding glass door in our living room, and it faced the woods. The couch was against the wall half in front of the sliding glass door, but angled in such a way as to see the TV that was against the wall next to the sliding glass door. One of those big old tube TVs with the wood paneling. Now, Friday night, my father had not come home from drinking, so me and my mum, we camped out on the couch that night. We were watching a horror movie marathon, I think, and I should add that my father would get pretty drunk and was super abusive, so my mum slept with a knife next to her on nights that he would stay out late. It was a rough time for us, but we got through it the best that we could. The knife, which was just a kitchen knife, would come into play later, but anyway, we were watching Halloween, eating snacks, laughing, having an enjoyable time. We fell asleep at around 10 p.m. on the couch, Mum with her back to the couch and her cuddling me. And the next thing that I know, I awake to my mum screaming. This wasn't unusual in my house, as again, my dad was an abusive drunk, but when I opened my eyes, a tall thin man in a black hoodie was standing over us, and it was definitely not my dad. My eyes met his and I was frozen, but fast thinking from my mother, she grabbed the knife from the coffee table and lunged at him. He stumbled backwards and regained his footing and ran out of the open sliding glass door. My mum jumped up, slammed the door shut and locked it, and then called the police. When the police got there, they said that he probably used a knife to pop the lock. They noticed a ton of cigarette butts, but didn't match to my parents outside the sliding glass door. The police said that he was probably sitting out there watching us all night before getting the courage to come in. They also said that they had several calls of a Peeping Tom that matched his description in our complex over the past couple of months. For whatever reason, he chose our house to be his first. My parents, they got divorced shortly after this, and we then moved in with my grandma, and I was so thankful for no more encounters like this. Still to this day, though, I check all the locks before I go to bed, twice, and have a pole in our sliding glass door as well. Looking out of a window at night, it still makes me uneasy thinking that someone is out there on the other side, watching. Honestly, I don't even know where to get started here. I'm mainly sharing this to get everything off of my chest in a community of people who may or may not have had similar experiences in the past or the present. I'd also like to add that creepy, unexplainable things have always happened around me since I was a little kid. But anyway, here it goes. so I moved into my apartment in September of 2023. I've always felt comfortable and calm in my home, and besides my usual nightmares, always had them, generally not too scary. Everything was pretty good. But either at the very end of December or January of 2024, things started getting weird. It's important to note that I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment. The first time something happened, I was sound asleep and was awoken to 3 knocks on my bedroom door at 3 a.m. I usually slept with the bedroom door open and just started closing it at night. It was loud and deliberate. I just told myself that I'd imagined it, and while I was pretty scared, I drifted back off to sleep pretty quickly. The next day, I was on my phone with my sister and I told her what happened. Out of curiosity, I knocked on my bedroom door and it was the exact same sound. Over the next few months, I heard 3 knocks at my bedroom door, bathroom, or front door at around 3 a.m., 1 a.m., or 11 p.m. I even had a friend visit in March, and he was awoken to 3 knocks at the front door at 1 a.m. as well. It was around this time, the first time, that I heard my daughter's 7 to 8-year-old voice say "Mum" next to my bed, and then a couple of weeks later behind me at the head of my bed. My daughter is 12 and lives full-time with her dad, so I knew and told myself that that was not my daughter. I also experienced what sounded like claw scratches across my stand-up heater across each metal section. Looks a lot like a radiator, when I was fully awake laying down in bed. Another time I was in bed and for a couple of seconds, I smelt sulfur next to my bed and got up and left my bedroom, it was so strong. After this, I took my first actions. So I have a favorite tarot reader or psychic that I found, a popular social media app that I can't type out because it isn't allowed. But last year, when he was first starting out doing free readings, I was on his live stream the night after hearing my daughter and asked him and my 13 other people that were live with me for advice. Him and a few people suggested burning sage. I couldn't do this though because it would set off the smoke alarms in the building. The next thing that they suggested, using sage incense, making loud claps all over the apartment, in the nooks and the crannies, to break up the energy and get it moving throughout the apartment. Lastly, to open a window and ask whatever or whoever is there to please leave through that designated window. I couldn't find sage incense at Walmart, so I got a plug-in wax warmer and picked up Palo Santo sage wax melts. I went home and I did the ritual, and surprisingly enough, I didn't have disturbances for like 3 weeks after this. During this time, I started leaving the bathroom light on with the door cracked, the bedroom door cracked that is, and the kitchen light on in the kitchen every night, and slept with my winter hat with the top open for my hair as a sort of face mask. But cut to Sunday night and I was woken up to the sound of like a wooden pop hitting the floor, like a staff or the wooden end of a broomstick next to my bed. I thought it was time to get up to go over to get my daughter up for school, but noticed that it was completely dark outside. I had my hat over my eyes and told myself to stay calm and roll over to pretend like I just went back to sleep. A few minutes pass and I hear it again, and this time I feel the vibration on the floor. I sleep on an air mattress on the floor, by the way. I ignore it, but then it happens 2 times in a row. I keep ignoring it, then it happens another 2 or 3 times in a row. I jump up and say, "What the heck is this?" and dash to my living room, grab my purse, shoes, and leave my phone. When I got to the bottom floor, I noticed that it was 12:15 in the morning. I slept over at my ex-fiance's that night on the couch because I was too scared to go back. Eventually, I go back to my apartment Monday night and I start hearing a loud wooden pop noise like when a house settles, but live in a concrete building, and I'd never heard it before. I was on the phone with a friend until midnight and kept hearing the loud crack or pop noise in the bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, every 5 or 10 minutes for around 2 hours. Eventually, I fell asleep on my chair because I was nervous about sleeping in my bedroom again. and was woken to another pop at 2 a.m. I decided to just bite the bullet, and I fell asleep on my bed that night, but woke up about every half an hour or so, but no disturbances that I had noticed. I left my apartment at 5:50 to get my daughter up, and that was that. Eventually, I get home at about 7 a.m., and I decide that I needed to take a nap from not getting a lot of sleep the last couple of days, and doze off at about 8 a.m. But I was awoken at about 9 a.m. to what sounded like a loud flick against the air mattress, and I felt it. I said nope to that, and I went to lay down in a ball on the chair again. I was woken up to the loud flick of the air mattress twice, then was awake and heard it again, like flick and air mattress moved even. And at that, I decided that I was leaving. I packed up, went to the bathroom, and I heard the same sound of the air mattress moving. Got in my car and I drove to my dad's an hour and a half away, in part to see him, but mostly to just get away from my apartment. I'm still here now. I've told this to all of my friends, sister and dad, every step of the way, and yesterday my therapist and peer support in detail as well. And to be honest, I'm very nervous about being back at my apartment again. I have so much fear in my heart, and genuinely, I'm just scared. I checked with my apartment manager today, and nobody has died in my apartment in the past. I called a local Catholic church and left a voicemail with a priest to call me for guidance and hopefully meet up and discuss coming to my apartment with me. I've always been non-religious, but now I am open to anything at this point. It's worth noting too that I was having horrible, disgusting, wicked thoughts that were so bad that I can't tell anyone what they were because I don't want to be arrested when the disturbances started escalating. But I'm wondering if anyone has had any similar experiences to this. And most importantly, how did you get them to stop? Do you now feel safe and secure in your home? Are you still living with whatever it was today? And if you do, how the heck do you do it? "11 years ago, I was living in a big house where my grandmother had passed away a year prior to the incident that I'm about to tell you about. So it was just me and my dad. My dad lived in the upstairs portion of the house, and I lived in the downstairs part, which was essentially its own apartment. We were pretty much in the middle of nowhere, in the woods of Ohio. And one evening at around 8:20 p.m., it was raining and just after dusk. You could still see some light on the clouds outside, but it was pretty dark. I was playing my game when I had to pee, so instead of using the bathroom like a civilized young man, I stepped out onto the concrete patio. I started my stream, and as soon as I looked to the right, a bright yellow light engulfed my field of view. It was like a cop shining his flashlight in your face, but it was a deep yellow instead of bright white. Naturally, I yelled, "Yo, Dad, I'm peeing, what are you doing?" But I got no response or laugh, like he would normally do if he caught me doing something stupid or silly like this. That was when I noticed that the source of the light was moving backwards as I was trying to pull myself together from my stream. I walked back inside, thinking it was my dad being weird or something. I sat down and then thought about it. My dad wouldn't be outside at this point. I mean, he was upstairs watching TV a moment ago. He never goes outside at this time, or in the rain. So I went upstairs and asked him, "Were you just outside 5 minutes ago?" And he responded with no. This has been bothering me for years, on top of many other unexplainable things that went on at that house. This one, though, it definitely disturbs me the most. I mean, my dad just wouldn't be over there on the side patio like that. There's really nothing to do over there. It's just a big empty space. So, who was that? So I had some weird stuff happen last night. I took my 2 dogs for walks. I normally walk Finn toward the park where I've had these sorts of experiences, and I walk Booger the other direction toward downtown. On my walk with Finn, about a block away in the direction that I was headed, I saw 3 or 4 deer calmly walking toward the park. Most nights where something weird happens to me, it always starts like this too. The deer seemed completely unbothered by me as I approached. They kept walking toward the park but stopped every few steps to sort of look back at me, as if they sort of wanted me to follow them. Then, as Finn and I reached where the deer were, I noticed about 10 or more other deer waiting as well. They all start walking together calmly, but still looking back at me every few feet. On my way toward the park, I then smell the stench of just rotting meat. I know that smell very well, as I used to be a butcher, and it was strong, like someone plugged my nostrils with rotting ground meat or something. At the same time I smelled the stench, I also get the chills. Finn's hair also stands up and he begins to get more nervous. I can feel the air around me getting colder as well. As we continue walking, I look down an alleyway that cuts the block in half, and if you would walk down that dark alley, it would spot you out where I eventually walk back home. I was 2 blocks away from the park, and when you reach the park, you can either turn around and walk back down the same road, or you can continue into the park, or you can continue on the road which turns left. Looking down that alleyway, you are looking at the part of the road that continues left, which is the way that I take every night on my way back home. And what I saw, I tried to convince myself wasn't real. Or maybe I just saw something else and my brain tried to convince me that it was this. In any case, a large, muscular, pale, hairless creature that was moving fast was now in my view, so fast that I could barely see it. I saw the motion down the alley about 2 blocks away. The exit of the alley on that side, it has a streetlight directly above it, and it definitely wasn't standing still. It was moving, and it was moving fast. The only reason I'm positive what I saw wasn't a deer, or something normal, is because of something that I saw later that night that I'll share soon. It was with my walk with Booger. It solidified that what I saw was something that I wasn't supposed to. In the meantime, I convinced myself that I was making stuff up and just being weak. As we approached the tree line of the park, the large group of deer moved to the side of the street where the neighborhood is. While I'm on the side with the tree line, I noticed something in the clearing. A lone deer separate from the large group across the street, staring directly at me. I have my flashlight pointed at him, and I even hung up my call with my wife to use my phone to take a video of this moment. This lone deer doesn't even have micro movements from breathing though. The other deer across the street were constantly readjusting, but this one wasn't moving. It was like a statue. You might be thinking to yourself, oh yeah, deer do that with bright lights shining at them. Deer in headlights always act like that. But Finn, he starts to pull very hard and acts anxiously, nearly knocking me over. I turn to look across the street towards the large group of deer for at most 3 seconds before quickly turning around to face the lone deer again. And in those 3 seconds, that lone deer is easily 30 feet closer to me, still not moving, staring directly at me. And at that, I felt weird. I felt unsafe. I mean, I've lived in rural Iowa my whole life. I am and always have lived outdoors. But this didn't feel normal, and I was scared. I back away while shining my light at this thing, and once I get a block or so away, he finally turns around and calmly walks into the tree line. The whole way home, I feel like I'm being stalked though. Not just watched, but like something is following me. Now, I went home and I sat for a bit, and tried to talk myself into believing that it was all just coincidence. After nearly 20 minutes, I started to walk Booger, my smaller chi mix. The entire walk was nice and pretty enjoyable actually. I had my earbuds in and was talking to my wife about what I saw in a joking way, like, man, I just completely scared myself for no reason at all. At the end of the walk, I turned to go around our alleyway, and as I leave from the garage on our walks, I stopped speaking from what I saw on the opposite end of the alley, and my wife heard me stop. I want to preface this by saying that I did not have any substances, including alcohol, for weeks up to this point. The most I ever do in that apartment is a few beers, or occasionally I'll use some weed to ease anxiety if life is getting hard, but I have no mental conditions that will cause me to hallucinate. The most I have is a personality disorder resulting from trauma that I've been overcoming quickly this last year. But what I saw were two large, muscular, pale, hairless creatures walking like apes at the end of the alley. The same thing that I could have sworn I thought I saw with Finn. This time though, not going fast, much closer, and it felt intentional. I saw them walk across the street very slowly, staring directly at me, and these were definitely not deer. They didn't have long faces like deer, they didn't have fur or tails, they didn't walk like deer, they weren't slender like a deer, and my first thought, honestly, was that I was looking at two hairless male lions in the middle of Iowa of all places. I stood there though, paralyzed with fear, even well after they had left my sight. 15 seconds or so later, I finally get the courage to walk with the few feet into the garage, and when I take my first step, I then see a third one, slowly sort of meandering across the street, staring at me. Booger noticed him too and started growling. I ran to the door and watched the garage shut all the way, and the entire night, Finn, he just sat at that bedroom door, seemingly guarding it, and I have never seen him do that before. He sat staring at that door all night. Booger stared at the windows all night, and he never does that either. This all happened to me yesterday, and quite honestly, I don't know what to think about it. So I was in my apartment about a month or maybe 2 months ago. My roommate just texted me and told me that he was going to head on to work, and about 5 minutes after that, I get up from my desk, I have a gaming PC that's barely holding itself together, and go toward the kitchen for a refill on my coffee. I leave my room and I'm coming down the hall toward the kitchen and the entrance to my place, when I see a shadow being cast onto the rug at the entrance from someone standing in my kitchen. I even hear someone moving around the silverware, forks, butter knives, that kind of thing. My first thought was my roommate hasn't left just yet, and I say, "Hey man, you still here?" and continue walking towards the kitchen and the entrance. The whole time there's sounds of like a chain jingling and a buzzing sound sort of. I round the corner expecting to see him, but when I do, no one is in my kitchen. So my second thought is that it must have been my dog. It roams free in the apartment and has his harness on, so maybe it was him shaking her clothes or something. It roams free in the apartment and has this harness on, so maybe it was shaking clothes? I wait a second for the dog to come out the other side of the kitchen, but after about 5 seconds, I'm becoming very puzzled. With furrowed eyebrows and a confused frown on my face, I lean in to look out of the peephole on the door to see what's going on outside of my apartment door, and I still hear the jingling chain and the footsteps, almost like someone was walking a large dog past my front door. Whatever it is that's happening, I don't see anyone though, so I assume it's something happening out of view out there, and I just sort of shrug my shoulders and like, oh well, right? But here's the weird part. I turn around and am immediately faced with what I'm going to describe as a grey, leaning around the corner with one 3-fingered hand touching the wall. It looks insubstantial, but like it's made of smoke or fog. I gasp and take a step back, and it ducks back around the corner without a sound. I start saying things like, "It's okay, you can come out, I won't hurt you, and I'm sorry, you just startled me." Of course, there's no reply. I go up and inspect the corner where I saw it, and there isn't enough room for someone to stand there and peek around, much less to hide from someone coming into the apartment. There's like 4 inches of clearance between the edge and the TV, so unless someone was like 2 inches wide, They just wouldn't fit there. And look, I know as well as you that it sounds crazy as heck, but I swear that it's the truth of what happened. Maybe it's stress and I hallucinated it. Completely possible. Maybe I'm actually sick and need medication for some kind of chemical imbalance. I mean, I don't want to be a schizophrenic, but it's possible, right? And yes, before you ask, before that and every single night since, I see things out of the corner of my eye, but when I turn to look, there's nothing there. Not once have I felt threatened or afraid. I remember watching this YouTube video about lizard people having wardrobe malfunctions on live TV. I know it's probably all bunk, but I enjoy a good conspiracy theory as much as the next guy. It's entertainment. But I really just don't want to be the crazy guy. I watched this video and honestly didn't have a single thing on my mind when the encounter began. I just recall that was what I was doing when it started. I figure that I'm probably going to get a bunch of people probably doubting things and saying hateful stuff, and I can't help that or how I feel. The only thing that I can do is just try to be honest with the world and with myself. I may be cracking it, who knows, but this is what happened. I swear on it. Last year, I, an 18-year-old female, was living in a very rural town in the middle of the mountains. Most small western towns only have one road that goes into the big city. Our road in particular was about 50 miles of empty highway, surrounded only by cliffs, fields, and occasionally a farm. At the very entrance to this road, once you enter the city, is a huge truck stop or gas station that is always packed. Now, my mum and I were going back home after a midnight showing of whatever movie we had decided to see, and as per usual, we stopped to fill up on gas and get a drink for the long drive home. As we were leaving, I vaguely noticed a dingy older Jeep pull out at the same time that we did, but of course I didn't take much notice of it. It wasn't weird at all that somebody would be leaving at the same time as us. As we started down the pitch-black road, the Jeep kept a steady pace behind us. Again, not weird. Until it came flying up past us before disappearing behind a hill. Mum and I just sort of scoffed at it. We were going 60, but when people knew the roads well, they often drove them at close to 100 at least, even at night. Eventually, though, we came up to the Jeep from before and it was pulled over, but the back half of the vehicle was in the road, and what was clearly a man's arm was waving at the window, gesturing for us to pull over. Of course, we just pass it. The man flies past us once more and pulls over again. He does this once more, and my mum and I begin to get very nervous at this point. After passing him for the third time, he flies up and begins tailgating us. He's driving so close now that we can't actually see his headlights in the rearview mirror, and he's honking his horn every so often, waving his arm for us to pull over. He carries on with this for another 30 minutes. Mum and I are terrified. She's white-knuckling the wheel. I'm holding a pocket knife to make myself feel better. I swore at my mum for the first time that night, begging her not to pull over. If you've ever seen the movie Rest Stop, then that is all that was going through my mind. The road is a complete dead zone for service, so we couldn't call the police or anyone for that matter. And the picture of us dead or worse on the side of the empty road was the only thing that I could think about. But just as suddenly as it had all started, it ended. The man slammed on his brakes, turned around, and just went back. The ride home was eerily silent, and I ended up sleeping in my mum's room out of fear. The next morning we had a discussion and came to the conclusion that me had seen two lone women traveling at night and thought that we'd be easy pickings, which he would have been right, to be honest. Some people suggest that he had seen us drop money or a receipt at the gas station and wanted to be a good Samaritan. Personally, I think that's ridiculous. Nobody following two women home in such an aggressive manner has good intentions. We moved out of town a few months later for unrelated reasons, but just before we did, the same car was reported following a group of 4 men on their way to work. So, maybe he just likes to scare people? Either way, that night was easily one of the scariest that I've ever had. I would like to share with you an encounter that I had in September of 2012 in a French woods. I'm not sure of the name of the forest, but I'm still haunted by this creepy encounter, and I'm having a hard time accepting that I'm unable to know exactly what this creature was. So, I was 20 and I was in an old small truck with an old friend, a 55-year-old who was the driver. I was sitting in the passenger place on the right side of the truck. The truck was really old, and I remember that we couldn't go faster than like 30 or 40 kilometers an hour. We were driving from Normandy, and we took only the very small road in order to stop anywhere that we wanted to visit this old church at, or an abandoned house, or a German fortification, etc. In other words, we weren't in any real rush. We were expecting to arrive, though, at our destination, a house that belonged to friends of mine, at around 3 in the morning. But we were late, and it was 3 a.m. when we entered a huge dark forest in the night. We were driving slowly in the woods on a straight small road. The old lights of the truck were some kind of blinking yellow, and at one point, I saw some very black humanoid outlines on the left side of the road. It was a very clear outline too, because it was the light of the truck that sort of outlined it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been able to see it, but the creature was on 2 legs as a biped would walk, no tail, and at first I really couldn't see any arms. As we were slowly approaching the creature, though, I saw it turning its head in our direction. We were silent in the truck, saying no words. My friend was just driving, and I was wondering if I was hallucinating. We slowly drive in its direction, and it started to cross the road as it was staring at us. It had huge yellow eyes, a bit like an owl. It was around maybe 2 meters high. We almost were at its level, and I remember fearing that if I opened my truck door, that it would probably grab me. I saw its arms sort of swinging along its thin black hairy body. It had hair all over its body as well. I saw its outline as we approached it, but it arrived on the other side of the road and suddenly stopped, turned in our direction, still staring at me or us. A few seconds later, we passed it, and I didn't move my head, just looking at the right rearview mirror, seeing that it was still staring at our truck, letting us drive away from it. My friend and I didn't say a word, and maybe about half an hour later, we drive out of the dark woods, and I said something like, "Well, weird things do happen in the woods." And my friend was suddenly extremely nervous, saying, "Yeah, did you see that? What the heck was that?" We talked about it, and he saw the same thing as me. He thought that he was hallucinating because we were very tired, but no, we both saw that thing in the woods. Today, he's in his 60s and I'm in my 30s, and we are both still really haunted by whatever this thing was. We talk about it every time that we meet each other. He is particularly marked by the intelligence in its big yellow eyes. I'm an urbexer since like 2004. I visited the catacombs of Paris every few 2 months. I saw weird stuff during my explorations, but I've never feared anything like this. This, whatever it was, it honestly scares me. One day I actually found a picture on the internet. Sadly, I didn't find the artist and there was no context, but whatever it was, it looked a lot like what we saw that night, except for the eyes. The creature that I saw had big round yellow eyes, but apart from that, it was pretty much the spitting image. So when I was a kid, maybe 6 or 7, this was the mid-1990s, we took a family trip to the beach in Florida. We were staying in a beach house a short walking distance from the beach. We went to the beach and I was supposed to stay inside of my mother, but I wandered way down and before I knew it, I was lost. A lot of the houses looked the same, and I really wasn't sure which one was ours. Plus, I couldn't see my mum anywhere. It started to rain, and I came to a path that I was pretty sure led back to our house. Only, it didn't lead to a house at all, but instead to a parking lot. There was a big dirty van parked there. It was the only vehicle around. I was about to turn back when I noticed an overweight woman with brown hair, a hot pink tank top, and those sort of big clunky thick glasses that were popular in the 80s, waving and smiling at me from the passenger seat of the van. She said something like, "Oh my, it's raining. Where's your mummy? Let us take care of you. It's dangerous to be out here in the rain. You could get struck by lightning." She was very friendly, almost overly so in fact. In the driver's seat was a very overweight man without a shirt on, a hairy grey chest and some clunky looking gold chain. He was also wearing yellow tinted Elvis shades and staring at me intently. He was smoking a cigarette, which I knew was bad. The woman stepped out of the van and kneeled down to me. She asked me how old I was. When I told her, she gleefully remarked, "Oh my, we have 2 boys your age at our house. You should come over and spend the night. We've got movies, Nintendo, and in the morning we've got all types of cereal." Now, I had been taught all about stranger danger, but at this point in my life, no adult had ever given me any reason not to trust them. The lady continued talking about stuff like how the boys have go-karts and that they like to drink chocolate milk. She made it seem very enticing for a 7-year-old kid, and at this point, I trusted her. I mostly liked the idea of getting to play with some kids my age. Then I remembered that I needed to ask my mum first. I told her this, and she told me that that was no problem, that they lived just up the road. My mum shouldn't mind. It started raining harder, and she opened the sliding door of the van and said something like, "Now let's get you out of this rain and go find your mummy." I knew logically that I really shouldn't do this, but the woman seemed really nice, and I was desperately wanting to get out of the rain. As I walked toward the open door of the van, I noticed an awful stench that almost made me gag. This set off alarm bells in my head that something just wasn't right. There were cigarette butts all over the floor. I looked up at the fat man who was not only staring at me with this menacing glare, but he had this really creepy sort of toothy smile, and his teeth were stained a really dark yellow. I could pick up on a very messed up vibe from him, and I knew now that I should run, but the woman was ushering me to hurry up and get in. Her demeanor had changed now, and she was being very demanding and trying to literally push me into the van. She sounded angry and said, "Get in already," in a tone that was the complete opposite of how she sounded before. I jumped to the side and started running as fast as I could. The woman managed to grab my arm or wrist, but somehow I was able to quickly break free and run back to the beach. I think she tried to chase me, but like I said, she was really overweight. I made it back to my mum, who was freaking out. I tried to explain what had happened to me, but I just don't think that at 7 years old, I was able to convey the gravity of what had actually happened to me, and I didn't fully understand it myself. Needless to say, my mum never let me out of her view again after that. Just over 10 years ago, I was dating my first ever girlfriend. We had just gone public and came out to our parents officially. At the time I was 15 and she was 16, if memory serves. Both of us lived in pretty good households and went on to an accepting school. However, for whatever reason, when we went public, we had secretly dated for 2 years prior to that. She went fully off the deep end for our final year together. I'll quickly mention that she was really abusive throughout our entire relationship. I had just got out of an extremely abusive relationship, so I had a hard time recognizing the danger that I was in. It felt normal, I guess, but it got particularly bad this one night when she snapped, I guess. I'm hesitant to attribute her behavior solely to a psychotic breakdown, because, quite honestly, I think that she was an evil person. So, To summarize the lead up to this quickly, she had recently, within about 5 months leading up to this, told me that she had 7 souls living within her, all of which hated me. But they were all men from Victorian era or something, and she apparently had lost herself to these men, and as each one emerged, she would abuse me in a unique sort of way. I'm going to give them aliases, as this should help with understanding it all, even though they're not real. I'm still afraid of her and them, I guess. But Duke liked to choke me in my sleep. Harold hit me. Han would try to cut me with knives when I was sleeping. Theo would ignore me, silent treatment. Gerald would force himself on me while sleeping. Tim would pick apart my appearance and bully me. But Alex was the worst, and the entity that I had to deal with the most towards the end. Alex was the present one this evening. He'd play Paranormal Activity and torment me with the creepiest stuff that you'd ever seen. For instance, he would sing in the corner of the room in the dark. He would mutter to himself constantly. He would smile at me while saying things like, "You'll die soon," or "You don't have to fear me when I'm unarmed." He was into knives and sharp things. He never self-harmed, but would try to harm me regularly. He also convinced me that if I ever left him, that he would kill me. I was 15 and I believed it. Now, you may be wondering at this point where our parents were in all of this. Well, my parents had just freshly divorced and custody was being settled. I stayed at my partner's place on the weekends and during some weekdays due to it being safer. Things were just really messed up in my own household that it genuinely seemed safer at the time. This is also where my hesitancy comes in with the legitimacy of their psychosis. Whenever their parents were around, they'd just snap out of it, literally like a light switch. They could turn the crazy off and on like it was nothing, which makes me think that they did this with the intention of harming me, not as a cry for help. Anyway, fast forward to the afternoon that had happened, my final straw. We were downstairs, Alex, or my girlfriend, and myself, watching TV. Their parents were going to be out for the whole day, and upstairs was their older sibling, who was a complete hermit, kept to their room with soundproof headphones on, in fact. And well, Alex also hated this person for no real reason. I was sitting at the downstairs kitchen table working on some homework when I hear Alex start humming in the corner like usual. I turn around and ask if they're okay, but they do the creepy smile and nod thing. I went into freeze mode and just went back to my homework while keeping a close but discreet eye on them. It always got bad for me when I reacted, but I had a feeling that they were about to have a violent outburst for some reason. They started walking over to the kitchen, still humming, but there was a shake in their voice that I hadn't heard before. I looked up slowly and saw that they were taking a large paring knife out of the knife block. I remember my adrenaline started to kick in and I looked around for ways to defend myself. To my surprise, they started walking away from me, not towards me. I watched them walk down the hallway and towards the stairs before they exclaimed, "I'm going to kill you." I presumed to their sibling. Something came over me at this point, and before I knew it, I was booking it up the stairs and trying to stop them as they started running, knife in hand, up the stairs. I grabbed their pant leg and pulled them down a few steps. We both collapsed as their sibling opened their bedroom door. It was a ways away because it was a huge house, and asked what was going on. Alex, at this point, turned around and struck me with the knife, leaving a huge gash on my arm and shoulder. I retreated back downstairs as they calmly called out to their sibling, "Nothing, just tripped. I'm okay, thanks." I ran to the kitchen downstairs, texted my parents to come and get me, and started cleaning and bandaging my arm as best as I could. Alex returned at this point, and as soon as we made eye contact, they dropped the knife, walked into the kitchen, sat on the floor, and started singing to themselves while rocking back and forth. I was stunned, literally going into shock. I stared at them, bloody tissues in hand, and informed them that I was done with all of this and was going to wait outside for my parents. They began crying through the song that they were singing, still smiling like a maniac. But I never went back after that. I broke up with them over the phone about a week later. They sobbed and told me that they'd get rid of their souls and that she still loved me, but I didn't listen, just hung up, and that was that. She even dropped out of school, which meant that I literally never saw her again after that. Years later, though, I found out that she's dating this friend of hers that I also was familiar with as a teenager, then found out that she was cheating on me with them for the entire time her and I dated. I've tried to feel bad for her for years, but honestly, I'm still healing from the several attempts at my life, and it's hard to feel bad for an abuser like that, let alone someone who attacks you with a knife. Anyway, it's good to get this off my chest. I've been in therapy for this recently, and I wanted to share it to kind of reflect on it also, I guess. If you have any questions or need any clarification, then do let me know. Be careful out there who you date, and if you see red flags, then please take them seriously, because otherwise you'll end up like I did. I'm really not even sure where to begin with this. I just wanted somewhere to talk about this with people who won't think that I'm crazy. I work at a school or daycare, and I swear to you that there's a demon in it, or possibly several. As someone who has never had a for certain paranormal experience, this has been a hard pill to swallow. My belief was always more of a, oh, well, it could be real, and I am not enjoying finding out for sure. This is awful. It's terrifying and nerve-wracking, and I want to throw up just thinking about going to work tomorrow. I'm searching for a new job as hard as I can, but it's slow going. So, it started with a particular toddler room called T5. Since I started working there, I've never liked going in there. Couldn't put my finger on why exactly, but I just hated T5. I thought that it was just that the kids were really out of control there, really mean and aggressive for toddlers, but it ended up being more than that. I was in there giving a break to their main teacher. I'm afloat, and all the kids were taking their nap like usual. The room was dark, no sound except for a quiet white noise machine. Then I heard something around the corner at the sink. The dishes started clinking, like someone was doing the dishes. I looked around the corner and nothing was there. I sat back down and it started up again. I shrugged that one off, but the next time that I was there, the closet door opened by itself. I still tried to shrug it off. Other things were happening too, like I noticed that I was suddenly having a lot of weird health problems, mostly related to reproductive stuff. I was getting bad dizzy spells and double vision, but I didn't make the connection that it was only happening at work and only when I was in T5 or adjacent rooms. Then, another teacher who I'd become friends with mentioned offhand that she and her daughter, who also had worked there, had felt like the place had really negative energy. When I asked what she meant, she sort of tentatively admitted that she'd seen weird things. Without me telling her first, I asked her what she saw, and she also described dishes clinking, doors opening, hearing a deep voice speaking from the ceiling, and dizzy spells and other weird health stuff. She also told me, I don't have proof of this or anything, that her former co-teacher saw stuff too. She also had 2 unexplainable miscarriages while she worked there, and now that she quit, she's pregnant again and almost due with no complications. This teacher also told me that the former main teacher of T5 had been into occult stuff. I don't know if this is true or not. I only met her once, and all I noticed was that she was a really sort of snappish and negative person who no one else really could stand. She quit a week after I started, so I really didn't know her well. I do, however, know that 3 current teachers are also into occult stuff, based on their social media posts. All 3 also bullied me and another teacher over here for being Christian. But after that, it got worse. I felt like I was being targeted, in fact, or attacked. I feel dizzy, like the floor is tilting, almost all the time when I'm in there. My body gets weirdly racked with pain that doesn't subside until I leave the building. This horrible dark depression comes over me, like life is pointless. I close my eyes and see glimpses of knives cutting my skin. During nap time, when the kids are asleep, is always when the thing really acts up. In T5, dishes clink every time, once the sink even turned on. Then whatever it was started knocking glasses on the floor. That one actually woke some of the kids up. Another day during a nap, I got my air cut off for about 5 seconds, like something had me by the throat. Then, one of the almost 2-year-olds pointed to the doorway of the classroom and nervously said, "There's a ghost in there." She and another child often stare at something towards the ceiling and burst into uncontrollable crying and screaming. It sounds like claws are tapping on the glass window happening all the time, and shadow figures glide past the big outside windows. The other day, another teacher who I had not talked to about any of this nervously told me the bathroom door in her classroom closed itself and clicked locked, despite the fact that it scrapes on the floor and has to be pushed really hard to close. Prior to this, my work bestie, the only other religious employee, had been the only one to say that she'd seen stuff. She quit shortly after this too. Now a third teacher, not religious, had seen stuff as well. And last week, I saw it. It was like a black diamond shape in the air above the shoulder and a little bit behind a teacher standing in the hallway. The shape was kind of like a cloak draped, but mostly just a black mass with blurry edges. The head wasn't really describable, I guess, but the closest thing would be a cross between a vulture skull and a plague doctor mask. I only saw it for a second and jumped out of my skin, but I know that I saw it. It's worth noting too that the teacher that it was behind is a horrible person who probably shouldn't really even be working with kids, and he has a weird mood swing thing going on and alternates between hitting on female teachers and acting aloof, and yells at the kids a lot as well. Today I was supervising napping kiddos in an older classroom. That class has an autistic boy who is not very verbal. He was sound asleep and I was sitting in a chair between him and the bathroom when I suddenly began to feel really cold and the familiar "I'm being watched" feeling, so I knew something was in there. Then I heard things being scooted around in the bathroom. It was quiet enough not to wake up the kids sleeping right by the bathroom, but the little non-verbal boy suddenly woke up, pointed at something, and absolutely screamed. He isn't like that at all. I ran and hugged him and said "get out" at the thing. It took a few minutes, but the feeling faded and the little boy laid back down. So, I've gotten enough confirmation about this that I'm convinced now that it's real. And my question for all of you is, how do you deal with this? I feel traumatized and honestly, I just hate this. I can only talk about it for sure with the one teacher, but everyone in the building acts dark and sort of depressed. I'm having night terrors now, anxiety attacks are increasing just from having to go to work and be around this. If other people weren't experiencing it too, I would think that I was going insane, but others have, and the kids see stuff as well. Plus, I only experience stuff at work, never anywhere else. Everything is fine as soon as I'm not in the building. So, please let me know if you've seen something like this before, if you know what it is, and if you have any advice that you can give me of how to deal with the fear, then that would be much appreciated. Also, I just found out yesterday that the bully teacher is completely getting away with everything. She even convinced the mum of the student that I was lying, even though 2 other teachers had also come forward with the same information. And I was just told that because I just answered a parent's question honestly, I'm no longer allowed to be a floater. I am to be kept contained in one classroom so that I don't interact with the other staff or expose them to anything else. My boss literally used the word "kept contained." I'm just so floored by this whole thing, and I'm desperately applying for other jobs as fast as I can. In the late 90s, I accompanied my mum to England so that she could see where her grandparents had lived. I was basically there to look after her because my dad didn't want to come and my mum has a hard time doing things for herself. Our agreement was that after spending a week in England, the second week we would spend in Ireland. But my mum is terrible at planning, so we ended up spending a week sort of in limbo in Liverpool waiting for the Irish Sea to calm down so that we could cross on a ferry. It was September, which is probably the worst month to try and cross here, and we never made it to Ireland in the end. Anyways, for 5 days I had to try to find places for us to sleep at, because she also made no hotel reservations for our entire 2-week stay, and I was completely unaware of this until we were already in England. I picked a hotel that seemed okay, and my mum paid to sleep in a different room because she has really bad RLS and shakes violently at night. It keeps everybody up. In the middle of the night, I heard a man yelling in the hallway though. He had to have been very intoxicated. He was pounding on the doors all the way down the hall and hitting the walls. Being the punk kid that I was, I made the mistake of acknowledging his rage by telling him to shut up. This really enraged him. He started beating on the door, screaming that he was going to kill me. He tried the doorknob and thank God those doors had an automatic lock. I started looking around the room and realized that this hotel has no phones in the room. Like I said, this was the 90s. I went to the window, but I was 3 floors up and windows didn't open either. So I just stayed there, listening as he did his best to break the door down while threatening what he was going to do to me once he opened the door. And this went on for at least 20 minutes. Somehow I finally fell asleep, and when I woke up the next morning, I saw just how much damage he had actually done. He smashed in my door with a fire extinguisher that he had apparently pulled off the wall nearby. There were dents and marks all down the hall where he had dragged it violently from end to end. The worst part was my mum down the hall never said anything. When I told the clerk as we were checking out, he looked at me like I was crazy and making it up. I told him to just go and look. Later I asked my mum about it, and she said, "Oh yes, I thought I heard you screaming. Was that you crying for help?" When I was 14, I worked at a McDonald's that was connected to a gas station. It was a truck stop basically, so it was very busy 90% of the time. The only downside to working at a truck stop fast food place was that the bathroom was on the complete other side of the building. Now, I was a freshman in high school. At the time I was pretty small, maybe not in height, but certainly in size. I was around 5'6" and anywhere from like 130 to 150 pounds. Not super tiny, but small enough to where I'd probably have made an easy target. This wasn't really a fear of mine, however, but maybe it should have been. I remember that I was in gym class. It was maybe the middle of the school day, and it was one of those days where we could just sit on the side and catch up on work for other classes if we didn't want to participate in the game. My friends and I did this almost all the time anyway, and almost never actually worked on anything important. We were laughing, joking around until I received Power School notifications, my school iPad excusing me from the remaining classes of the day. I was really confused by this, considering that my mum hadn't mentioned anything about picking me up so early, and I was only seeing my dad every other weekend, and he wasn't the type to pick me up from school. I was grounded, so I didn't have a phone with me, other than a cheap flip phone that my mum had gotten me from Walmart. I texted her about the notifications, but before I got a response back from her, my gym teacher told me that I needed to grab my things and go to the office because my mum would be picking me up. This confused me even more, and I shot my mum another text asking if she was picking me up from school. She freaked out though and told me not to leave the building. At this point, I was sitting in the office by the window, waiting for apparently nobody to come and pick me up until the situation was figured out. My mum ended up calling the school and letting them know that I wasn't allowed to leave with anyone that day. Apparently, whoever called claiming to be my mum and said that they were coming to pick me up wasn't actually her. As far as I know, nobody ever showed up to pick me up, and I didn't hear anything else about it. My mum wasn't comfortable with me working at a truck stop, and we got my location switched to a McDonald's that was closer in town and wasn't connected to a gas station. Because what we think might have happened is someone saw my name tag and possibly called all the schools in the area until they found me. I still have no idea how they would have known my last name, but with that said, it was a creepy experience, and I'm really glad that I texted my mum that day, because if I hadn't, quite honestly, I probably would have just walked out. This is the recount of my first ghost encounter that turned me from a non-believer and a skeptic to, well, eventually a believer. The first event was highly peculiar due to the strange things that, looking back, were probably a precursor for the actual encounter. I was around 15 at the time, if that's of interest, and at that time, I was a non-believer, like I said. I was invited to stay at my, at the time, sister-in-law's parents' house to meet them for the first time. This was around the time Borderlands came out, and I had played that game endlessly and beat it several times. Since I was going to stay there for about 3 days, I brought my 360 and Borderlands with me. The room that I was going to stay in was fairly small and had a mini pool table, treadmill, bed, and a tall dresser with a TV atop. There was no door to the room, just the doorway, which they kept main hallway light on throughout the night, and carpeted floor. The light in the hallway would bleed into the room and slightly give light on the immediate wall to the right as you enter. To the right of the dresser, there was a treadmill that had some clothing draped over the panel. The mini pool table was to the left as you entered and served as a nightstand for the small twin-sized bed in the room, where I placed my iPod Touch and an empty bag of Doritos. So, around 11 p.m. as I was playing Borderlands solo, while in voice chat with a friend, as I was playing, the clothing on the treadmill kept looking like it was moving or changing shape. This happened 3 times before I mentioned it to my friend, which I laughed off. The logical explanation is that I was playing on a bright TV in a dark room, and anything that I was not visually focused on will look like it was doing lots of stuff due to the light refraction or whatever. Just your mind playing tricks on you, and I was trying to come to a conclusion of the information that I was being given by whatever was around me. After we laughed about it, the clothing stopped seemingly morphing, and nothing out of the ordinary happened shortly after that. About an hour passed, and the clothing started to morph again, but this time it was appearing more defined. Though as I would look at the clothing, it would still appear to be there for a quick moment, but sort of then return to normal. 5 minutes or so passed, and without any morphing, moving, or anything, it looked like all of a sudden there was an owl perched on the panel of this treadmill. I could feel it looking at me, and I could sort of see it out of the peripheral of my eye. I stopped controlling my character and tried to focus on this owl without directly looking at it, using peripheral vision. It remained there, looking directly at me. Without closing my eyes or losing mental focus, I looked directly at it, and whatever it was, it remained there for a couple of seconds, then quickly faded into the clothing again. I immediately told my friend how the clothing was looking seriously like an actual owl at this point, and he didn't say anything back. I asked if he was still there and if he could hear me, but still nothing. If you've played any 360, then you know that it makes a sound and brings on the guide overlaid on the game. I pressed the guide button to check to see if it was still in the voice chat. The sound played as if the guide was opened, and the game went semi-dark as it does when the menu pops up. But the menu guide didn't populate. I couldn't control the game, nor could I close or get out of what was supposed to be that guide. All that I could hear was the ambient sound of the game, but no music or anything, just the sounds of the wind blowing. Trying to unfreeze the game, I pressed all the buttons on the controller several times in hopes that something would happen, but nothing worked. I was giving it a moment in hopes that it would unfreeze on its own. Then there was a dialogue that I'd never heard before. Again, at that point, I'd beaten the game several times on all difficulties and heard every bit of NPC dialogue that you can imagine. But the first line was, "You don't belong here," in a deep voice that was how some of the larger NPCs sounded, which my hair stood on end. There was about a 5-second gap before the second dialogue occurred, which was, "You don't want to be here." And once it finished, the guide popped up and I saw that my friend was still in the party. I immediately asked him if he heard anything that I said, and he said that he didn't hear me say anything. Now, I cannot stress enough how I had invested hundreds of hours at this point and a few hundred after, and not a single time had I ever heard that dialogue occur before or after this isolated event. In fact, I tried over and over again to get it to happen again, but it just never did. When I told my friend about what had just happened, we both agreed that it was creepy, but even then, as I was indeed a little startled about the events leading up to this and including the unheard dialogue, I still did not entertain the idea of ghosts or anything of the sorts. I just thought that it was all really strange. After this, though, it didn't take long for me to fall asleep, which was restful and without dreams. My sleep was mildly interrupted by what sounded like the snack-sized bag of Doritos being crumpled in somebody's hand. I thought that it was my mother-in-law doing some cleaning early in the morning or something, and remained half asleep with my back facing the rest of the room. As I'm laying there with my eyes closed and trying to go back to sleep, the sound of the crumpling bag didn't stop after what felt like an entire minute. I was now starting to become closer to being fully awake and slightly annoyed, since it felt like it was really early in the morning. A static-like sound began to irritate me, and I thought to myself, what the heck? Why is she messing up with the empty bag forever like that? At this point, I'm fully awake, but with my eyes closed, facing the wall while the sound persisted. I reached the point that I would turn over to find out what exactly could she be doing, making this noise while I was sleeping like this. I opened my eyes, looking at the wall, tuning into the sound with my mind, entertaining out of frustration the possibilities as to what she could be doing. I turn over from my left side to my right to see the room still dark, with the light from the hallway bleeding into the room, giving light to the closet doors on the far side of the room. And in the matter of what felt like maybe 5 seconds total, I saw this dark hooded person sort of shape standing immediately to the side of the bed. The wall, closet, and other junk were somewhat visible through this person, which I was only then, the first 2 seconds, seeing the hip and chest of this figure, which had a sort of slight transparency about it, around what would be maybe 50 to 60% opaqueness. Realizing, though, that this figure was actually in front of me, I began to look up towards its face. There were no distinctive features where a face would have been. It was just as black and shadowy as the rest of its body, though it had a very similar shape, making its head appear to be sort of hooded, a loosely fitted one, I guess. While I couldn't see the face, I felt and saw it not looking forward towards the wall, but instead directly down at me, staring at me as I just stared at it. The time that it took to look up at its face was maybe about a second. The staring took the final 2 seconds of the encounter. My eyes began to widen as my mind couldn't make an immediate logical sense of this, more so the transparency of this humanoid-shaped figure clearly looking directly at me. And when the feeling of fright began to spread through my body, the figure, at a sprinting pace, left the room through the doorway. I watched this figure leave the room, following the length of the room, to execute a flawless 90-degree turn through the doorway. Like, it's hard to explain, but it was as if it was on some sort of track or something. It never sped up or slowed down. The speed was absolutely phenomenal and immediate. As it moved, there was no sound, no footsteps or anything. It was completely quiet after the crumpling stopped, when I met its face, so even after seeing what I saw, I still evaluated with fear that if there was any bit of logic or sense to this, I would have at the very least heard footsteps of it running out of the room. But there was no sound, nothing, not even a whooshing of the wind or anything. I remained looking at the closet and then to the doorway in disbelief for about maybe 5 seconds, after which the fear spread through my chest and throughout the rest of my body, and finally met my head. Fear immediately overcame me. I flipped over and threw the blanket over my head. This had me so frightened that I couldn't do anything but hide underneath the blanket with my heart pounding and my mind just racing. I wanted to further prove to myself that this wasn't just a dream or sleep paralysis or anything, and to at least know the time so that I could at least have a sense of timeline and all that, and more importantly, see how much time was left before daybreak. As I lay there attempting to overcome my fear of just grabbing my iPod from the mini pool table for what felt like 30 minutes, with my eyes clamped shut, I rolled over as quickly as I could with my arm reached out blindly and frantically patting the table, feeling for the iPod. Once I grabbed it, I rolled over and went back under the covers and looked at the time displayed on the screen. The time was 5:55 a.m., which really has no significant meaning to me personally, other than the sheer coincidence that all the digits were the same, and this meant that there were only around 30 minutes until the sun would start to light up the windows of the room. I remained completely awake for the remainder of that morning into the day. As the rest of the house began their morning routines and breakfast began, I joined my brother at the table. He asked me how I slept, and I hesitantly started to give him just the core details that I saw, a shadow figure standing over me and how it left the room without making a sound. And he said that, yeah, her parents say this place has a ghost in it that lives here as well. Being my older brother, I simply thought that he was making a joke at my expense to mess with me, which is why I didn't expand on any of the other details. He insisted, though, that I'd tell his mother-in-law about my encounter. Embarrassed, though, I declined, since I still felt like he was just messing with me. After everyone had joined the table and begun eating with the traditional morning conversation going on, my brother spoke out to his mother-in-law that I had seen something that evening. Not wanting to appear to be a fool, I stated that I had not seen anything. However, he pressed it, and his mother-in-law doubled down on my brother's claim that she had told him that a spirit lived in that house. To try to move on from this, I folded and told them even less than I did my brother, and just said that I had seen a dark figure that was sort of semi-transparent looking down at me. There was some light questioning, as I think that they had started to get the message that I really wasn't open to speaking much more about it, such as, was it a woman, was it wearing a dress? But as I just said, it didn't feel male or female and appeared to be hooded and in black. In any case, this event certainly moved me from a non-believer to be a bit of a skeptic, I guess, on the topic of ghosts and spirits. Luckily, this was my final evening there, and I went back home later that day. No other events happened once I had left there, at least not for a few years later, but that's literally a few other recounts as lengthy as this one, which perhaps I'll get into another time. In any case, I didn't experience anything like this again in that place after that, and for that, honestly, I'm grateful. So, I'm a person with pretty long hair, but not female nor trans. And there's a girl in my university class last year that had the same hair color as me, black and long. She is quite popular and usually gets asked out a lot. Sometimes people confuse me with her due to us both having long black hair, a similar height and similar hair length. In fact, she would sometimes tease me about having to worry about such long hair. But that's off topic. So, one night in February, I finished my work and packed up since there was this term break coming up. It was getting a little dark out, but I figured that a single-kilometer walk to a friend's house wouldn't be too dangerous. I used to play a bunch of sports in high school, so I feel like the close proximity to the campus, as well as my own personal strength, I would be able to defend myself for just an hour. Canada, where I live, is pretty safe anyway, as many of you might know, so I walked on. It was around 10:30 when I started walking. Tons of students already left the campus beforehand, so there wasn't a lot of people traveling with me. Those who were probably just decided to spend another night anyway. My hometown is in British Columbia and my university was pretty far away, so I needed to board a plane to go back. And about 800 meters of walking later, I felt the presence of someone walking behind me. Suddenly, he put his arm around my neck and started choking me. It took me a second to realize what was going on, and the person was choking me really hard. I can feel my jugular vein expanding due to the lack of space for blood to go through. I kicked him in such a way that made his knee bend forward, and he started falling to the ground. I back-kicked him in the nuts, which is when he let go a little. Then I got out of his arms and started punching his face. In my adrenaline-filled moment, I thought that he was going to attack me again, so I punched him a few times to make sure that he wouldn't get up. I ran away and I called the police. Thankfully, I was okay with no damage. The guy who grabbed me was apparently a stalker, though, and had allegedly confused me for the girl that I mentioned earlier. He was arrested. However, I don't really know what happened to him. Although he did get charged with assault apparently and stalking. However, my memory's a little bit fuzzy around all the details because it was a little while ago. In any case, I'm kind of glad that it was me and not her that got attacked that night because, quite honestly, if it was her, I don't know if she would have made it out. When I was little, I slept-walked often. Things like running to my parents' room while they were on the couch, or just standing in the middle of my room in the middle of the night. Though, one story that my sister was the victim of, it really sticks out the most. My sister already thought that the house was haunted, so she thought that my sleepwalking meant that I was possessed. One night she was up late playing games and had looked over, and apparently I was just laying on my back with my eyes open looking at the ceiling. My sister called for me, but of course, since I was asleep, I had no answer. Though, as she was creeped out by this, she put the covers over her head and decided to just go to sleep. After a while, she woke up later in the night. She said that I was sitting straight up, staring straight ahead. My sister was afraid, so she yelled at me and once again went under the covers. After falling asleep once again, she woke up one last time. She again ripped the covers off of her head, though when she did, the first thing that she saw was me staring straight down at her, standing at the end of her bed. She said that she had ran out to our parents' room, people who had often witnessed my sleepwalking. But when they went to check on me, they said that I was perfectly sleeping in my bed like nothing happened. Interestingly enough, after this, they cleansed the house, and that was officially the last time that I ever slept-walked. I was a very odd child. I always liked weird things and the unknown, so I dabbled like a moron, and as we all know, when you go looking, something comes looking for you. I was about 13 years old, living in an apartment building with my mother and stepfather. I've always had insomnia too, and one evening I was tossing and turning when suddenly I just felt what I can only describe as dread. I was absolutely terrified. I had no lights on as I was trying to fall asleep. In this bedroom, I had double sliding mirrors facing my bed. I didn't know any better. But finally, I summoned up the courage to open my eyes and roll over. When I did, I stopped breathing. Standing next to my bed, facing the wall and looking outside, was a girl, roughly the same age, with long black hair and a soft pink polka-dotted nightgown, just staring at the wall, not moving, not breathing. I stared at her for what felt like hours, but was maybe just moments. Then I hid under my covers. It was probably about 15 minutes before the dread passed, and when I finally opened my eyes and peeked again, she was gone. This was the first and last time that I ever saw her. I would always get home first, as my mum and stepdad are police officers, so I was always alone. The apartment sometimes would just feel so heavy too. My computer desk faced a wall and my back would be towards all the doors. These doors would creak and move all the time, which was whatever, but one day I was on my webcam and I looked, and in the door to my parents' room, there was a black mass standing there, just existing. I, of course, panicked and looked behind me to find nothing. Things like this continued to happen to me throughout living there too. Fast forward 2 years though, I'm now living at my stepmother's home. I was taking care of her during her stage 5 breast cancer, so I'd often be home alone while she was in the hospital undergoing treatment. One day, I'm sitting in the living room watching TV, and from the corner of my eye, I see roughly 4 people in my yard walking up to my porch. I was weirded out as we lived in pretty much the middle of nowhere, but my stepmom has so many friends that it wouldn't have been too strange for someone to come and visit. I wait and wait for a knock. Nothing. So I go and open the door and nothing. No one is there. I go and look around the property and the gate. Nobody's there either. I just ended up ignoring this and went about my days. But maybe a month or so later, I'm downstairs again with Sky, our beautiful massive GSD, just watching TV. Suddenly, we hear a slam from upstairs. It sounded like somebody fell, got up, and then fell again. I was there alone with just the dog, but the dog was with me. It took me a good 30 minutes to go upstairs and look. I was scared, obviously, and Sky was scared as well. I wasn't going up there without her, and she was refusing to go up there at first. I checked my stepmom's room, and everything was normal, so I go about checking all the rooms. I finally get to my room, and when I get there, it is absolutely destroyed. My clothes were everywhere, my bed was disheveled, and a dog kennel that I had in there had the door ripped off. It was sat neatly next to the kennel itself. Needless to say, Sky and we slept downstairs that night. After that incident, things seemed to die down a bit though, and I'd mainly just see shadows from my eyes darting around and shadow people walking with me. At 15 to 16 years old, I got really into the supernatural at one point, so I started opening my mind, trying to connect to things and see what this was all about and what was all out there. This was fine and dandy, nothing too odd for a good while, just more of the same shadow people, door slamming behind me, my iPod randomly taking photos, random stuff like this. And well, around this time I met my first boyfriend. Somehow I was allowed to stay at this boyfriend's home with him and his parents on weekends and such. My boyfriend and his brother were huge into paranormal stuff as well. His brother dabbled in some very dark and wicked things actually. But one night, my boyfriend, his brother, and I are at the house alone, just talking and hanging out, and I'm looking outside, when all of a sudden, a broom just gets yeeted across the porch. I stop and say, "What was that?" Of course, they're giddy and excited, but I wasn't. I had an odd feeling, to be honest. Later that night, we had gone over to a friend's house who lived up the street, and we drank and smoked and did all the teenager stuff. As we're walking home, I see something in the distance. It's right out in front of my boyfriend's house, and this thing, from where we were standing, honestly looked a bit like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. I freak out and shout, "What is that?" and point. This creature-like thing squat-walked in front of my boyfriend's car and just never came out. I was petrified. I didn't want to walk past the car, but I also was afraid to let him go ahead and me become engulfed by the forest and darkness that we were walking in now. We made it past the car eventually, and nothing. At this point, I'm done though. I'm scared and I just want to go to sleep. My boyfriend didn't want to sleep though, so he and his brother went outside to smoke and be boys. Maybe about 2 hours later, I hear my boyfriend say my name. Why are the lights out? I'm lost. Then a moment later, I heard him say, "Open the door, it's dark out here." I got up from bed, went to open the door, and froze. I froze my hand inches from the doorknob. Something just told me, no, don't do it. Do not open that door. So I did what anyone would do, and I just hid under the blankets crying. Another hour passes and my boyfriend finally comes in. I asked him if he asked me to open the door and if he really got lost in his own home. And he looked at me like I honestly had 3 heads and told me, "I've been outside since I first came in." That was the most significant thing that happened in that home. The energy was always focused in the kitchen though, and I'd often hear someone say help from the pantry, but I always ignored it. More years passed and I decided enough was enough, so I closed my mind off at this point. This worked for a while too until I moved to another state. I moved in with my sister. Everything was okay for a week or two, but one morning I was getting ready for work and I heard a crash coming from my sister's room. I was alone again. I went into her room to see what it was, and she had a clock on the floor that she was fixing. It was leaning against the wall, no batteries, one hand missing, and the remaining hand was violently spinning. At this point, I'm in my 20s and I just left. I slammed the door and I just go back to business. Then one day, she opens up to me about some weird things that have been happening around the house. So I suggest that we set up some cameras and, man, it did not disappoint. We caught a hand appearing and disappearing on her couch, as if it was changing the TV channel. Then we caught the couch being hit, the computer flashing on and then immediately shutting off, and something falling in the laundry room. This activity eventually calmed down as I told her that we need to stop and do something about it. Another year passes and I got my first house. Everything seemed great, no bad vibes or anything. For the first few months of living there, everything was good. Then one day, I'm sitting in my living room and I hear voices in my basement. I just said nope, and I didn't check. Instead, I got a security system installed on all doors and windows, with cameras watching the outside. And while I was working one day, I got an influx of alerts. Garage door open, garage door shut, master bedroom window open, pool door open. I got home really quickly. I didn't call the police immediately. I didn't want them in my home without me there since I have guard dogs. I cleared the house and everything was fine as far as I could tell. Nobody was there. I'm a bit shaken, but eventually I forget about it. Until a few days later when the same thing happens. I did the same thing, rushed home, checked everything, and cleared the house. So then I had this terrifying thought, what if I have a voyeur? So I bought cameras and installed them in every room, but I didn't see a single thing. The sensors still went off, so I called the company and they checked if something was wrong. But no, everything was working just fine. Everything calms down eventually until one day, while I'm trimming my dog's nails, I hear thundering footsteps rushing towards me from behind. I didn't have time to react before I felt an icy chill in my neck. I looked around scared as if I was about to be murdered, but there was nothing there again. So I got up at this point, told whatever it was to get lost, and slammed my door. A few nights later, I'm watching TV in the living room, and in my kitchen I see a black mass peeking from around a good foot above my cabinets. When I fully look, there was nothing there, so we did a song and a dance of this for a good while, and it got to the point where, I don't know, I just sort of got used to it, I think. I didn't have bad vibes, so I just ignored it. Then I had to leave my home for about 2 weeks. When I came back, all of my pictures had been knocked off the walls, even in the dining room. If I hadn't have had to unlock my doors, I honestly would have thought that it was broken into. So I just simply apologized to whatever is there, that I'm sorry I left, but I had to. I'm home now. Everything was good for a while until one night I was woken up. I'm in pure terror. Something is definitely in my room and I can feel it. It's a horrific energy. I didn't dare look. I kept my eyes closed the entire time. That was maybe a month or so ago now, and I haven't experienced anything since. Obviously, I have many more stories, but these are the ones that pop out to me the most. If anyone has any thoughts on what this could be, or if it's something that's attached to me, and what I should do about it, please do let me know.